You've got a rage problem, right?
It's not a problem!
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is a full-on reboot of the beloved 80s cartoon. It's well animated, action-packed, and funny, and the best part is that since it's a reboot, fans of all ages and all levels of turtle knowledge can enjoy this one. Likewise, since it's a reboot, we start fresh with new younger iterations of the characters and their moralities. With great turtle power comes great turtle responsibility, but which characters really take that to heart? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem Good to Evil. We've got a shell of a lot to go through, so let's get started with the most heroic character and work our way down to the most evil. These characters are the good. I for one will never use the word rat as an insult again after seeing Splinter in action. Initially, like most parents in teenage movies, he's portrayed as an antagonistic light, refusing to allow the turtles any contact with the evil humans of the outside world. But you'd be wrong to mistake Splinter for anything but pure-hearted. In fact, despite his own reservations due to being constantly mistreated by humans, he actually tried to go into the human world because of how much the brothers wanted to. This resulted in him being attacked, and Mikey nearly being hit by a truck. So it's not hard to see why he's a little overprotective. He takes home the gold medal of good for two main reasons. The first is obviously his devotion to the boys, placing their happiness and safety above all else, and even saving them on a few occasions, in addition to him stopping Mikey from getting run over. Later on, he fights off a whole army of Cynthia Outram's soldiers to save them, and at one point he tried to bring the human world down to the sewers with a handmade restaurant experience and some cardboard cutouts of humans, all to make his boys happy. As for the second reason, Splinter has a solid redemption arc in terms of his mindset. In fact, he's the one who encourages the turtles and the other mutants to rise up against Super Duper Fly in the final battle, and pushes them to show the world just how cool they are. When Superfly parallels his own words of his way of thinking, being the only way to happiness and safety, he's heartbroken at what he's done and determined to find a way to support his sons in their desire to live normal lives alongside humanity. A good parent and a hero who's constantly striving to be better at both. How could he not be our top pick? Though him eating his dead cockroach friend is kinda questionable. The silver medal of good goes to the one-of-a-kind party turtle, Mikey. The smallest and most outwardly nice of the turtles, Mikey is the type of guy who views everything and everyone around him with a sort of childlike innocence. Whether they're mutants in Superfly's gang, humans like April and his end-of-the-movie classmates, or anything in between, anyone can be a friend in Mikey's book. We place him so high because it seems as though he doesn't even have the capability to have ill will towards anyone. Seriously, even when he and the others are fighting against Superfly's gang, he can't help but apologize for crashing Mondo Gecko's car and sending him through the window. He's also the first to question how Splinter will feel about the brothers' plan to fight Superfly in the first place, showing that he's always got the feelings of others on the forefront of his mind. Whether you need a hand in combat or just to pass you another slice of pizza, Mikey is too pure for this world. But if you thought he was great, the bronze medal of good winner, Mondo Gecko, is righteous. Out of all of Superfly's minions who turned out to have an interesting shift in their motives by the movie's third act, Mondo Gecko still manages to stand out as the most outright good of the bunch. For one, when Superfly reveals his plan to wipe out humanity to the turtles, Gecko expresses that he genuinely wishes there was another way to feel happy and safe. This isn't a killing spree to Gecko. My dude literally just wants to live and let live. When the turtles confront Superfly and the mutants to tell them they can all live together and figure out how to integrate into human society, instead of just wiping them out, Gecko is the first one to openly defy Superfly's orders, inspiring the others to do the same and join the turtles. It's also notable that he and Mikey vibed on an equal level immediately, which takes a whole new level of chill. Landing just outside of our top three is the leader of the turtles, Leonardo, or Leo. Admittedly, he doesn't make the best first impression. After Splinter questions the brothers about where they've been, he immediately throws them under the bus by revealing they'd defied him and gone to a movie unsupervised. While Leo's heart is in the right place, only wanting to protect them from trouble from the outside world they've been trained to fear, it's still a bit nasty of him to be so quick to snitch on his brothers. That said, Leo's by-the-book way of thinking does have its benefits too. He always insists on doing the right thing, regardless of how dangerous it may be, and he's able to encourage the strengths of each of his brothers individually in the final battle. Leo is like a good older brother in real life. Sure, you might hate him sometimes in his stick-in-the-mud moments, but at the end of the day, you know you've got someone to fall back on. Okay, side Side note, apparently Leonardo's voice actor in this movie also played Gumball Watterson. The reason I say that is because I would have sworn that was true of Donatello. Yeah, that's his transition, but don't worry, there's more to say about him. Being the main nerd of the group, Donatello is the most clever of the turtles. Whether he's using his knowledge of Attack on Titan to figure out how to take out Super Duper Fly, which was a super cool reference by the way, or absolutely roasting the hell out of his brothers. Like telling Mikey his head looked like Stewie Griffin had a baby with Hey Arnold. Not only is it funny, it feels exactly like the insult of a 15-year-old. Aside from his penchant for insults, Donnie is a nice guy. He's a bit more cynical than Leo or Mikey before him, but he's no less willing to help save the day and no less loyal to his brothers. He's just a bit more straight to the point is all, and he will absolutely end your career with his insults. Worth a quick mention for our next spot is singing sensation Ray Philly, another one of Superfly's mutant buddies. He'd rather be singing than causing chaos in New York City. Much to Superfly's annoyance. He gets very little screen time, but we felt he deserves his own slot for the simple reason that he's, along with Mondo Gecko, the most peaceful of Superfly's found family, as well as the very second to question his evil plan. At the very end of the good characters is resident reporter in training, April O'Neil. Now, if there's anything that can be said about April, it's that she's honest. When the Turtles asked her if there were more humans like her who would accept them, she straight up denied it. On top of bluntness, she also has pretty selfish motivations, only wanting to help the Turtles take down Superfly so she can report on it and push her career forward, healing her wounded high school reputation as Puke Girl in the process. When the Turtles are captured, she seemingly runs away and flakes on them. While this would place her very low, we're willing to forgive her because of her role in the third act. She helped the Turtles by getting Splinter's attention, convincing him that some humans were alright, and even reporting on live news that the mutants fighting Superfly were good guys working to protect the city. And yeah, she did puke at the end, but credit where credit is due. With the good section wrapped up, we now enter more neutral territory. These characters fall in the gray area. This one might break a few hearts, but kicking off the gray area section is the last of the brothers, Raphael. Raph has always been the most short-tempered, impulsive, and overall violent of the Turtles, but Mutant Mayhem really kicks it up a few hundred notches. He enjoys causing destruction wherever he goes. In one scene, he interrogates one of Superfly's minions, and after he gives him the information they need, Raph just punches him anyway. Later on, in the aforementioned scene where Mikey says sorry to Mondo Gecko for knocking him out of the truck, Raph assures him that he himself is not sorry in the slightest. While he is a bit mean and a lot more than a bit violent, it is hard to blame him. After all, he is just a teenager who's frustrated with the fact that he's been taught that society will shun him, so he can never be a full part of it. He also saves Donnie from being hit by a falling car thrown by Superfly, showing that at the end of the day, he'll do anything to protect his loser brothers. Hopefully he actually gets that therapy the movie was joking about, but for now, we feel like this is a comfortable placement for him. While we're in the neutral territory, let's go on and mention the other mutants. Wingnut, Bebop and Rocksteady, Leatherhead, Scumbag, and Genghis Frog. First of all, let's just say that the existence of a character named Genghis Frog is awesome. Secondly, you might wonder why we placed all these guys so much lower than Mondo Gecko and Ray Philly. The answer is simple. For those two, we saw point blank that they're peace-loving, gentle, friendly people. We certainly see good qualities in the others, but what sets them apart is that they are a bit less sad about the whole murdering all humans part of Superfly's plan. That said, they're not even close to evil, especially considering they join the other mutants to fight against Superfly by the end of the movie. And rounding out our gray area, we have Baxter Stockman, who actually only appears in the first couple minutes of the movie. That said, he's surprisingly crucial to the plot. The man who made Superfly and perfected the toxic goop. I mean, ooze.
Ooze! I like that. I like ooze.
That turned both he and the other mutants into what they are now. Baxter lamented that he never felt like he belonged or was accepted anywhere, feeling more akin to the animals he experimented on. Animal experimentation is like the gray area thing to end all gray area things, to say the least. And what makes him even more indeterminable is the fact that we know nothing of why nobody seemed to accept him. Was he just awkward? Is he legitimately insane? Either way, the man's a genius, and we'll hopefully learn more about him in the inevitable sequel. Oh, and fun fact, he was voiced by the actor who played Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. So on that note, let's go ahead and break bad and talk about the characters in the bad and evil section. While there's no shortage of henchmen seen throughout the series, they all belong to one of two significantly bigger bads. The first of these being newcomer villain and silver medalist of evil, Superfly. The man with a plan to eradicate humanity, Superfly is determined to release Baxter Stockman's ooze into the atmosphere, which is just Ew, why did he have to say it like that? To turn all the animals in the world into mutants. His plans for humans are to use them as slaves, entertainment, or just something stupid. To his credit, Superfly has a sympathetic motive. Humans took his father away at a very small age, leaving him to raise his mutant siblings by himself. When he tried to enter human society with the gang, they immediately retaliated. Unfortunately, Superfly is no Splinter, as his solution, rather than simply living peacefully away from humans, was to murder all of them until he and his kind were the master race, and the only race. Now, as a human myself, I get why it would seem Superfly deserves the gold medal of evil. His plan is a legitimate threat to all humanity, and when he's transformed into Super Duper Fly, his pleasure in attacking both humans and his own fellow mutants is nothing short of disturbing. He also uses humans to help his plans, and kills them when he's done, which is really messed up even before you consider Superfly's own plan being to eradicate all humans anyway. So he was basically having them do hard labor just to ultimately die by his hands. But like the other mutants, he at least did what he thought he absolutely had to, and had a somewhat sympathetic motive behind his monstrous deeds. But since he looks down on anyone who doesn't hold his own violent solutions in high regard, he more than earns the Silver Medal of Evil. And while this may be controversial, we believe the Gold Medal of Evil has to go to Cynthia Uttram. This woman is seen from the start of the movie as the one who ordered henchmen to steal Baxter Stockman's mutating ooze. She intends to use mutant blood to create an army of mutant super soldiers. Her motives for this are unknown, though they almost definitely involve big money and power. But what we do know is that she brought Splinter's greatest fears to fruition by milking the poor turtles of their toxic ooze. Since we know little about Cynthia and her motives, what exactly justifies calling her more evil than Superfly? Well, here's the thing. Superfly and Cynthia were both willing to abuse and even destroy their opposing species, humans and mutants respectively, to reach their goals. They're also equally willing to use others as expendable pawns. And that goes double for Cynthia, given how terrified her men are of her frowning on their failures. The difference, however, is that while Superfly's would certainly be a greater threat to you and me, his motives were for his own people to live in peace and happiness across the earth. Cynthia, on the other hand, is draining mutants of their blood and essentially torturing them so that she can develop super soldiers to either sell for big money, sick on other humans for the sake of killing them, or both. Any way you slice it, a human both abusing mutants and betraying humans is far worse than a mutant who views them as villains in their own eyes.
Oh my, I'm gonna... Turtle power! We've all heard of it, but what exactly is it? And more importantly, who's got the most of it? Today we answer one of those questions, whether it's sheer strength, abundant resources, or genius intellect. I'm Keefe Nossi with Wicked Binge, and this is TMNT Mutant Mayhem, Weak to Powerful.
6 in the morning, police at my door.
Kicking off our list is the closest thing to an average person we've got in this movie, April O'Neil. Really, that's pretty much why she's at the bottom of our list. As one of the very, very few prominent human characters in this film, April's the only character who's pretty much unremarkable in terms of power.
Yeah, I don't think this is gonna help people like you.
She's smart, has a knack for research, and is able to help the turtles from the sidelines, but considering that she can't really fight, she pretty much has to be at the bottom of our list. Second to last place is the mysterious mad scientist Baxter Stockman. Like April, this guy doesn't have any particularly impressive powers. In fact, April could probably body him if she wanted to. What April couldn't do, however, is create a perfect formula for creating mutant humanoid animals to act as family. Now, Baxter isn't physically impressive by any means, but he's an absolute genius. It's no wonder Cynthia wanted to take his formula for her own purposes. I kinda would too. Up next is the first of many, many mutant characters, Wingnut. Like the other mutants, Wingnut has powers related to her animal counterpart, of course, in this case, being a bat. She can fly and is decked out with mechanized weapons as her gear. While she's certainly strong, we don't see a lot of most of Superfly's buddies fighting individually. Mostly, we see them as a team, and given the variety of animal powers they have, we'll be going based on both what we see and their potential in the future. Wingnut, for instance, has some of the best mobility of the group, but not much in the way of actual physical strength compared to the others. We can say roughly the same for Ray Fillet. If you need help traversing water, Ray is your guy. In one scene, Mondo Gecko uses him as a water ski to great effect. He's one of the mutants we see the least of, so there aren't, again, many feats to go by, but since Ray has his specialty in the water, it's more than likely that most other mutants have their own niches as well, which is why we place him a little lower. It's worth noting, however, that they're still all pretty darn close. But now it's time to get to the first real bruiser of the movie, Leatherhead. One of the two gender-swapped villains alongside Wingnut, Leatherhead is a mutant alligator. I don't think much needs to be said other than that since, she's an alligator. Alligators are pretty strong already, so give one the intellect of a human, and I'm pretty sure she had a gun too. Yeah, so you've got the recipe for a tough customer. I can't remember anything she did in the movie, but I can tell you this much. I personally would not want to be on the bad side of a mutant alligator with or without a gun. You'd be smart to not patronize this next entry. Here's Genghis Frog. He may well be the cutest looking mutant in the whole movie, but he's also among the most ruthless. The fact that a frog is able to drive a car, has no problem wielding a battle axe, and even less of a problem using said battle axe is a sure sign of how dangerous this little dude is. Given that he's a frog, he's also pretty slippery. He's tiny, fast, and good at jumping, which would make him presumably pretty darn hard to get your hands on.
Don't patronize me.
Like those before him, he also suffers from, well, you guessed it, little screen time, but he's able to keep up with the others, and given that he's a tiny frog, I have the feeling this dude is way stronger than he lets on. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really vibing with this list so far, especially with my boy, Mondo Gecko. He may be the nicest of Superfly's mutant family, but don't let that fool you. Mondo's downright untouchable. Seriously, this man's skating skills are on another level entirely, allowing him to traverse different terrains with ease and making dodging falling debris look like an absolute cakewalk. Even if said debris does crush him, however, it's no big deal. When Mondo gets his tail detached by falling rocks, he comforts a worried Mikey by assuring him that it grows back. He's like SpongeBob. Even though he's not physically powerful, particularly, he's hard to get your hands on, and even if you do, you won't do much lasting damage. He's almost harder to get rid of than a cockroach. Almost. That keyword is why Scumbag is up next. A relatable character for me. Did you know cockroaches can fly? No? Well, now you do. Enjoy that fact. Scumbag is the furthest from human of all the mutants, mostly communicating in grunts and other strange noises. This makes him one of the most impulsive and unpredictable fighters, which gives him points already. We can assume, since he's a cockroach, that he's pretty durable as well. Like all the other mutants before him, he's one to look out for. Okay, it's time for the entry you've all been waiting for. Let's talk about the heroes in a half shell, the Ninja Turtles. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Why put these four in the same entry when the other gang of mutants were separate? Well, it's simple. The Turtles are not only always seen fighting as a team, but they also are all the same enemy, meaning their powers don't vary. What does vary are their weapons, from Mikey's nunchucks to Donatello's big stick, and their personal strengths. Leo's the leader, able to hold the team together in its toughest moments.
But we got a job to do.
Let's go. Let's
I'm the leader of the group.
Donnie's the brains who can easily come up with a plan even in the worst situations. Raph has the strength to lift a truck and has no hesitation to use it. And Mikey is something of a wild card who always thinks outside the box. Each one of them brings something unique to the table that's crucial to how the group fights. Tack on their solid, though not quite mastered, martial arts training, and you've got a pretty tough group of vigilantes on your hands. But you might notice we forgot a couple of members of Superfly's crew. And to that, I say, no, we didn't. If we did, this next entry wouldn't exist. Bebop and Rocksteady are next. For these two, let's see, take Raph's superhuman strength, right? Then make two of Raph, then pump them both full of steroids, and that's Bebop and Rocksteady. It ought to go without saying that these two have insane physical strength. They did effortlessly destroy that one arcade machine, after all. On top of that, they have solid endurance, making them able to act as sword or shield, whatever the situation demands. It's honestly crazy to think that those two were outside of our top 5, which begins with Cynthia Utram's underlings. Remember Baxter Stockman from earlier? Yeah, these guys are the ones responsible for apprehending him and getting a hold of his toxic goo. They're basically an incredibly highly trained SWAT team-esque band of soldiers, and given their boss's complete and utter lack of a moral compass, I think they're even more dangerous. These guys care solely about pleasing their employer, no matter who has to get hurt in the process. They have strength in numbers, high-tech weaponry, and excellent fighting skills overall. But where exactly would they be without their leader, Cynthia Utram? An absolutely ruthless human who wants to drain every mutant she can get her hands on of their blood, Cynthia wants to use Baxter Stockman's brilliant research to create an army of unfathomably powerful super soldiers. Her motives for this are unknown. It could be for money, power, or most realistically, it's probably for both. She has an insane amount of resources at her disposal already, though. Those guys we talked about in the last entry, every last one of them answers to her, and they fear her more than enough to do absolutely everything in their power to avoid screwing up. Mutants have even more of a reason to fear her, though. If she gets her hands on them, she'll milk them of all their precious toxic ooze to use for her own nefarious purposes. Only time can tell just how far her influence extends. The only thing keeping her from being higher on the list is that while her influence is extremely powerful, Cynthia herself doesn't really show any powerful feats. It'd feel wrong to place her above our last couple entries. Taking the bronze medal of power is the last of our good guys, Splinter. He's voiced by the legendary Jackie Chan in this iteration, and if you ask me, he's absolutely earned that honor. Splinter may look like an unassuming, gentle suburban dad who also happens to be a giant mutant rat with glasses, but he's still got his fighting prowess. He discovered the hard way that humans were hostile to mutants they didn't recognize, and quite understandably, he took that personally.
What? You watch a movie with a humans? Ugh.
The result was not only a prejudice against humans, but more relevant today, his own study of martial arts, to the point where he was able to train his sons from a very young age so they'd be able to defend themselves. But I hear you ask, how does this remotely justify him getting a top 3 position on the list? Well, it really doesn't. What does, however, is the fact that this man fought off Cynthia's entire army of super soldiers on his own. This was after quickly managing to get to her lair to save the turtles. Splinter's not a man you want to mess with, and by extension, you better not mess with his kids. Unless, of course, you want him to wax the floor on and off with your ass. The silver medal of power goes to the movie's main antagonist, Superfly. Basically, anything we said about Cynthia can be said of Superfly. He has a great sphere of influence, a loyal band of fellow mutants, and even a bunch of human lackeys he hires to do his dirty work to stay below the radar. The difference is that, unlike Cynthia, Superfly is also a force to be reckoned with on his own. He can fly, obviously, he has intense super strength, enough to lift a car and carry it a long way with ease, and is calculating enough to do everything he needs to for his plan without his face ever being seen. So, how is he not number 1? Well, he technically is. It's just that Super Duper Fly is such an insane upgrade that we had to put it in its own category. You know how in some video games you beat the final boss and it's all well and good. Then they become like 1,000 times their original size with way stronger attacks? Yeah, that's Super Duper Fly. The man is strong enough to tower above buildings, crushing everyone and everything in his path with ease. It takes all the other mutants and even humans working together at once to have so much as a prayer of taking him down. He almost manages to crush the turtles to death, and had it just been them fighting him, this movie would have had a much darker ending. Thankfully, the old Attack on Titan method of a weapon to the neck worked against him, but I gotta admit, it's still crazy to think that the only thing standing between Super Duper Fly and the destruction of New York City, and probably the entirety of humanity, is the fact that Donatello likes anime. I knew he was my favorite one for a reason.
Well, nothing we can do. You guys wanna grab pizza?
Fighting crime from the sewers of New York City, or trying to destroy it, whatever floats your boat, is one thing. But maintaining relatively healthy relationships in the meantime? Now you're just expecting too darn much. Tack on the fact that the turtles are more teenage than ever in Mutant Mayhem's iteration, and you've got a recipe for some turbulent relationships. I'm Keith Inosi with Wicked Binge, and this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem Relationships, Healthy to Toxic. Alright, let's kick things off with the healthy relationships. You'll have to forgive me for the predictability, but the gold medal of health has to go to Splinter and the Turtles. Master Splinter was a normal rat guy who was shunned and hated by society and only found purpose in life after adopting 4 adorable mutant humanoid baby turtles. While he's by no means perfect given his prejudice against humans, Splinter was doing his best for the boys 100% of the time. He did his best to let them live among humans, only keeping them from doing so because of the attacks they were met with. After this, he kept them below the radar and taught them martial arts so they'd be able to defend themselves. Even given this completely understandable motive for his overprotective nature, Splinter still proves himself able to grow. After fighting off an army of Cynthia Utram's soldiers to save them from being milked, he encourages them to work together and stop Superfly, supporting them in showing human society just how cool they are. The love is reciprocated too. Although the turtles are upset at not being able to live amongst humans, they still respect and care deeply for their dad. It's about as healthy as a father-son relationship could be in this situation, really. As volatile as it can be at times, the silver medal of health still goes to the relationship between Raph, Leo, Donnie, and Mikey. Naturally, the Ninja Turtles themselves had to be pretty darn high on this list. Through thick and thin, the turtles never abandon each other and support each other however they can. Whether it's something as major as Raph saving Donnie from a falling car, or something as minor as Leo giving each of them a pep talk before the final battle. Heck, even when they were being milked by Cynthia, the other turtles offered to try and sing Donnie some BTS songs since he'd never get to see them live. Their relationship is extremely loyal and supportive, while at the same time feeling realistic, which is actually why they're only in the second place spot. The brothers are caring for sure, but they have their flaws. Leo tends to be a snitch sometimes, Raph can be overly aggressive, Donnie roasts him like a charcoal grill under the sun, and Mikey, okay, he doesn't really do anything wrong, but nobody's perfect. For teenage brothers, they're pretty darn healthy. But they aren't the only mutants who embody brotherly love. The Bronze Medal of Health goes to Superfly's mutant gang, ironically excluding Superfly, consisting of Genghis Frog, Leatherhead, Bebop, Rocksteady, Mondo Gecko, Scumbug, and Wingnut. These guys are the evil mutants in name only. In reality, they, along with Superfly, were essentially orphaned at birth due to humans attacking Baxter Stockman in order to steal his toxic ooze. They may have more violent plans for humanity than the Turtles, but when you look at their relationship objectively, they've got this nice Phantom Troop-esque thing going on. They may be antagonists, but they truly just want to live good lives and keep each other safe, and in a sense that's pretty much the same as the Turtles, really. It makes sense too, considering they had no problem switching gears when the Turtles and Splinter told them they could all live together instead of having to eradicate humanity. On that note, let's give a quick mention to Splinter, the Turtles, and Superfly's mutants. While Superfly is, again, of course, an exception to the rule here, the Turtles' assurance that the mutants can live in peace with them and Splinter is what gets them to walk away from Superfly's evil plan. Each of them has their match in the group, whether it's the absolute vibe of a duo that is Mikey and Mondo Gecko, or the lovely couple of Splinter and Scumbug.
I've always wanted a cousin.
It's clear that this big family's gonna be a happy one. Hopefully, we'll see more of them in the next movie. For our last fully healthy relationship, we finally mention our first human character, April O'Neil and the Turtles. While the Turtles are taught to fear humans by Splinter, again for understandable reasons, April proves herself to be quite an outlier. They fight a gang to get her scooter back when it's stolen, and the two sides of this coin are willing to help each other out so they can get humanity to respect them. April might seem to lose a few points for running away when the Turtles got captured, but she did so primarily to get help from Splinter, and ultimately she was the one who reported on live TV that the Turtles and their new mutant buddies were good guys fighting to protect NYC from Super Duper Fly. The only reason their relationship isn't higher is that they both had their own selfish motives for being friends. The Turtles to become heroes loved by humanity, and April to get rid of her identity as a puke girl by saving her school's prom. But at the end of the day, they did become genuine friends, and I'm sure we'll see more of that in the next movie, just like the last entry. But before this list gets drenched in a generous helping of toxic ooze, let's take a quick trip to the gray area. I'm gonna get controversial right away by kicking off this area with the relationship between Superfly and his mutant gang. On the surface level, this one seems like a surefire winner of a spot in the bad territory, but honestly, you've got to feel some sympathy for the guy, Superfly. Like Splinter, he genuinely made an effort to live in human society with his family, but when rejected, he came up with a plan to turn animals into mutants and make them the dominant species of Earth, although the plan itself was terrible. Superfly genuinely loved his little siblings, raising them from birth and hoping to make a society where they could all live in peace and harmony. This relationship lands in the gray area for Superfly's attempt to kill them in the film's final act, showing that he's come to love his plan to take over the world with mutants more than his family.
And let the mutants rule the earth.
But other than that, aside from failing to recognize Ray Fillet's wonderful music, Superfly is a caring older brother to his gang. Next up, we're addressing the most mysterious character in the movie, only appearing in his first scene, Baxter Stockman and his mutants. Such mutants include, and are not limited to, Superfly, who was a successful experiment by Baxter and created with the intent of giving himself a family due to not feeling accepted amongst humans. In Baxter's own words, he always felt more of a connection to the animals he experimented on, which is why he's right in the middle of our list. While Superfly loves Baxter and holds him in high regard, he's the product of probably countless experiments on innocent animals. I get that the dude is just lonely, but there's no telling how many crimes against humanity, animality that he committed before Superfly came along. Speaking of humanity though, the final entry before fully toxic territory is that of Splinter and humanity in general. I know I've said it plenty of times by now, but I want to emphasize that Splinter has every right to be reluctant in accepting humans.
Watch a movie with the humans? Ugh.
They've treated the poor guy as a monster as long as he's been around, after all, and even caused one of his sons to almost get hit by a truck the first time they went out into the city. But by the end of the movie, he's had at least something of a change of heart. He at least acknowledges that some humans, like April, are good, and after her live report, Splinter's met with compassion from other humans for the first time. It can't erase the years of abuse he received from them, nor can it erase the years of prejudice Splinter clapped back with, but it's a start on the road to acceptance among humanity. The time has come for the final battle. Let's soak up that evil ooze in the toxic relationships. Falling all the way down here is the relationship between Superfly and the Turtles. At first glance, Superfly and the Turtles seem to get along pretty well. As a fellow mutant, he's willing to take them under his wing and let them join his gang.
I can't believe there are other mutants like us!
That is, until they express disagreement with Superfly's plan to destroy humanity, at which point he threatens them. While he's the lowest in the toxic area due to his initial willingness to team up with the Turtles, we still can't possibly place him anywhere but here due to how contingent their friendship was on the Turtles agreeing with every facet of his plan. Do boss-employee relationships count? Well, either way, next up is Cynthia Utram and her soldiers. The secondary antagonist of the film, Cynthia doesn't receive quite as much character development nor screen time as Superfly. That said, the point that she's an absolute menace is still made pretty darn clear. First and foremost is the connection between her and the soldiers she orders to attack Baxter Stockman to steal his toxic ooze and figure out how to replicate it. The soldiers fear her greatly, which is a sure sign that she doesn't exactly take disappointment well. With any luck on our end, she won't be too disappointed by the fact that her most toxic relationship, Cynthia and the mutants, is only taking our silver medal of toxicity. Given the fact that Cynthia is more willing to torture the turtles to take their blood or milk or ooze or whatever it primarily is, you'd think that this would be a shoo-in for the top spot, right? Especially considering her lovely motivation of using their ooze to make mutant super soldiers. It's clear that to Cynthia, mutants are nothing more than tools to be used for her own devices, which is a pretty big issue since they're living, breathing, cognitively aware beings. You might as well consider these top two interchangeable. But for me personally, the relationship between Superfly and humanity can't be beaten in toxicity. First off, take every negative we said about Splinter's relationship with humanity. He tried to live among humans and be accepted for the sake of his family's happiness, and things didn't work out. So he decided to write humans off as mutant-hating scum. The difference is that while Splinter decided to live in peace with his sons, Superfly decided the logical solution was to turn all animals on Earth into mutants in order to make them the dominant species. His plan for humans is to destroy all of them, use them as cheap entertainment, or even possibly enslave them, all of which are different degrees of horrific. What cements Superfly as our gold medalist of toxicity is his end of movie transformation into Super Duperfly, where he took matters into his own hands and started destroying New York City and everyone in it, taking great pleasure in murdering innocent people.
Mutants rule the earth.
Like Splinter, his prejudice was understandable. It's just the whole mass murder thing that I personally have an issue with.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have been entertaining fans for almost 4 decades, evolving from radical party dudes into gritty dystopian heroes, and everything in between. With each iteration, different aspects of their personalities and backstories have been emphasized, resulting in a multitude of versions that contribute to an overall sense of Ninja Turtleness. Despite the lack of an official definitive version, fans have accepted every new comic, television show, and movie as part of the complicated Turtle canon. However, some adaptations stand out as better than others. With a new movie right around the corner, it's the perfect time to rank every movie and animated incarnation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm Andrew from Wicked Binge, and this is every TMNT movie and animated incarnation from worst to best. Okay, as usual, we'll be starting with the worst and working our way up. And at the bottom of our list, we have Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have had a long and successful history in comics, movies, and cartoons since their debut in 1984. However, their only attempt at a live-action TV show, Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation, was a disappointment. Produced by Saban, creators of the Power Rangers, the show focused on overacting and lacked heart, with every creative aspect turned up to an extreme. Despite introducing Venus de Milo, the first female Ninja Turtle, the show ultimately only gave fans a few things to appreciate.
I do not require protection.
The show's writing lacked sincerity, opting for shallow and contrived plot lines, and the turtles' emotional depth was sacrificed for cheap jokes and one-liners. And again, we can't overemphasize the overacting. Moving on to TMNT 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 was the last of the original live-action New Line Cinema TMNT movies. It continued the trend set by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze, in which every successive movie cut out more and more realism and emotion to make room for slapstick comedy. The franchise's success was due predominantly to its almost $6 billion at that point in merchandise sales, most of that being action figures. Since kids were driving the Turtles' success, the movies began to play more to their market. Yet, for some reason, the film's creators chose to set their most childish movie to date in feudal Japan in the midst of an English incursion and a trade dispute. The bland attempts at historical accuracy left most of the movie's setting, plot, and characters with little to say, do, or emote. Most just grunt or scowl as they go about their grim medieval lives, making the Turtles' teenage banter seem alien and rude. Still, the film manages to capture a small portion of what made The Secret of the Ooze so fun, and that's a small victory. Next up, we have the Michael Bay reboots. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot movies that were released in 2014 and 2016, produced by Michael Bay, are known for their excessive style but failed to impress fans and critics. Even the cast members had a terrible time during the filming process. While the movies were financially successful, they failed to leave a lasting impression on most people and didn't leave any scope for a third installment. It's challenging to identify the exact reason behind the disappointment with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. Most likely, the issues with both movies were just enough to throw off the entire experience. Fans have pointed out major issues with the designs of the mutant characters, the wooden acting of the human cast, and the striking similarity of the first movie's plot to The Amazing Spider-Man, released in 2012. Megan Fox's casting as April O'Neil was met with mixed reactions from fans. Some praised her performance, citing her charisma and screen presence, while others criticized her acting in the portrayal of the character. Some fans felt that her character was poorly written and lacked the intelligence and resourcefulness that April O'Neil is known for in the comics and previous adaptations. Other problems include forced humor, lackluster fight choreography, and erratic pacing. At one point, Michelangelo attempts to distract the humans by performing a dance in a makeshift disco ball costume. The scene plays out as a comedic moment, with Michelangelo dancing and the other turtles and human characters looking on in disbelief. If we're being generous, these types of jokes are very hit or miss. Though, the elevator beatbox scene is unforgettable. Moving on to Rise of TMNT. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a 2018 animated series that reimagines the classic TMNT characters with new designs and personalities. While it's commendable for taking creative risks and trying something different, the show falls short in several key areas. One of the biggest issues with Rise of TMNT is its characterizations. The turtles are now depicted as more childish and goofy, which can be grating and annoying at times. Additionally, the personalities of the turtles are less distinct, making it harder to differentiate them from one another. The changes of the characters may appeal to a younger audience, but longtime fans of the franchise may find them off-putting. The animation style of Rise of TMNT is also a point of contention. While it's colorful and flashy, it can be too frenetic and distracting at times. The action scenes can be difficult to follow due to the constant movement and rapid cuts. Furthermore, the character designs, while unique, can be jarring to fans accustomed to the classic look of the turtles. Another issue with the show is its writing. The dialogue can be overly simplistic and dumbed down, which can be a turnoff for older viewers.
I do not think this will work.
The plots of the episodes can also be formulaic and predictable, lacking the depth and complexity of previous TMNT series. Overall, while Rise of TMNT is a bold attempt to revitalize the TMNT franchise for a new generation, it falls short in its execution. The characterizations, animation style, and writing all leave something to be desired, making it a less than stellar addition to the TMNT canon. Real quick, let's talk about Turtles Forever. Turtles Forever is a 2009 animated television movie that serves as a crossover between the 1987 and 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series. The movie starts with the 1987 Turtles and their allies encountering their counterparts from the 2003 series, who have been brought into their dimension. As the two teams work together to figure out how to return the 2003 Turtles to their own dimension, they come up against their shared enemy, the evil Shredder from the 1987 series and the Uttram Shredder from the 2003 series. Overall, Turtles Forever is a fun and enjoyable movie that pays tribute to the different iterations of the TMNT franchise. It's exciting to see the different versions of the Turtles interacting with each other and trying to work together despite their different personalities and styles. The animation is also impressive, especially in the way that it blends the different styles of the two series. However, the movie does have its flaws. Some fans may be disappointed that certain characters and storylines from the two series are left out or only briefly mentioned. The plot can also be somewhat convoluted at times, particularly in the way it tries to explain the differences between the two versions of Shredder and their various origins. In addition, the movie does rely heavily on nostalgia and references to the previous series, which may not be as enjoyable for viewers who are not familiar with the earlier iterations of the franchise. Some of the humor can also be hit or miss, and some of the jokes may fall flat for certain viewers. Next, let's move on to TMNT 2: The Secret of the Ooze. Released in 1991, TMNT 2: The Secret of the Ooze is the second film in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. The movie follows the adventures of the four Turtle brothers as they try to stop the villainous Shredder and his Foot Clan from getting their hands on a mysterious substance known as ooze. The film features the same beloved characters from the first film, including the wise Master Splinter, April O'Neil, and Casey Jones. It also introduces new characters such as the villainous duo Toka and Razar, who were created using the ooze. It's full of action-packed fighting scenes, with the Turtles showcasing their martial arts skills and signature weapons. The humor and lightheartedness that made the first film so popular are also present, making TMNT 2 a fun and enjoyable watch for fans of the franchise.
Come on! We gotta meet back up with Splinter.
However, some viewers may find that the movie doesn't quite live up to the original. The plot is somewhat simplistic, and the dialogue and acting can be cheesy at times. Additionally, the film takes some liberties with the established TMNT lore, which may not sit well with hardcore fans. Let's talk briefly about the 2007 TMNT movie. This was a notable departure from the previous live-action films, opting instead for computer animation. The story was a bit darker and more serious than previous incarnations, focusing on the Turtles' struggle to come together and save the world from an ancient evil. While the animation was impressive, the movie suffered from a lack of character development and some uneven pacing, making it a mixed bag for fans of the franchise. Overall, it's a decent addition to the TMNT movie canon, but not quite on par with the original 1990 film. Speaking of which, next up is the 1990 TMNT movie. Say what you want about this one, but it's sort of an important piece of history. Yeah, it's goofy, but it's a fun and action-packed adventure that will appeal to fans of the franchise. The film does a great job of bringing the Turtles to life with impressive impressive animatronics and puppetry, and the action scenes are well choreographed and exciting to watch. The movie also manages to balance its humor and darker themes, making it a great family film. However, some viewers may find the film's plot a bit simplistic and the acting can be a bit over the top at times, to say the least. Additionally, the movie's special effects and visual style may feel a bit dated to modern audiences, but you really should try to watch these types of movies through the lens of the year they were produced. At the end of the day, it's a classic piece of 90s nostalgia that still holds up as a fun and entertaining film. Nothing wrong with a little action comedy that doesn't take itself too seriously. Let's talk about Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, an animated film that sort of popped up out of nowhere. The plot follows the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as they arrive in Gotham City and team up with Batman to stop a joint plot by the Foot Clan and some of Batman's greatest villains. The film features a wide array of characters from both franchises, including Robin, Batgirl, Shredder, and the Joker, and it's a joy to see them all interact on screen. One of the standout aspects of the film is its animation style. The characters are rendered in a more traditional comic book style with bold outlines and vibrant colors that make them pop on the screen. The action sequences are also expertly choreographed, with each character utilizing their unique skills and abilities in creative and exciting ways. Another great aspect is the humor. The Turtles and Batman have very different personalities, and their interactions are often played for laughs. There are also plenty of Easter eggs and nods to both franchises, making it a treat for fans of both series. Next, we have the 2003 Fox TMNT cartoon. The 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon by Fox is a beloved and iconic iteration of the franchise. Running for 7 seasons, the show follows the 4 Turtle brothers as they battle their enemies and protect the city from danger. One of the most notable aspects of this series is its darker and more mature tone compared to the previous versions of the TMNT franchise. The show explores complex themes such as identity, betrayal, and loyalty, and isn't afraid to tackle heavy subject matter.
Hey, I'd really like to hear the story behind that big rat and the giant turtle.
One example of a darker moment in the 2003 Fox TMNT cartoon is in the episode Same as It Never Was, which takes place in an alternate future where the Turtles have failed to stop an alien invasion. In this episode, we see a dystopian version of New York City that has been ravaged by war and destruction. The Turtles are no longer the carefree heroes we know them as, and instead, they are hardened survivors who have lost many of their friends and loved ones. The animation style is also a standout feature of the series. The character designs are sleek and stylish, and the fight scenes are fluid and dynamic, making for some truly impressive action sequences. In terms of storytelling, the 2003 TMNT series is known for its strong character development. Each of the Turtles has their own distinct personality and backstory, and the show does an excellent job of fleshing out their individual arcs and exploring their relationships with each other. The 2003 TMNT cartoon is a fantastic entry in the franchise, offering a darker and more mature take on the classic characters while still retaining the heart and humor that have made the Turtles so beloved over the years. And on that note, let's move on to the original cartoon. We're giving the silver medal to the 1987 TMNT cartoon. The 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon is a beloved classic that helped to launch the Turtles franchise into worldwide phenomenon status. The show ran for 10 seasons and had 193 episodes, and it's not hard to see why it was so successful. One of the biggest strengths of the show was its perfect balance of humor and action. The Turtles were a hit with kids for their wisecracks and playful attitude, but they were also formidable fighters who took on the bad guys with skill and strategy. The show's action sequences were well choreographed and always kept the audience engaged. The characters themselves were also well developed, each with their own distinct personalities and quirks. Leonardo was the serious leader, Raphael was the tough guy with a heart of gold, Donatello was the genius inventor, and Michelangelo was the fun-loving party dude. The show's villains were equally memorable, with the likes of Shredder, Krang, and Bebop and Rocksteady becoming fan favorites. The animation style was also a standout feature of the show. While the animation may not hold up to today's standards, it had a unique look and feel that was unlike anything else on TV at the time. However, the show did have some flaws. Some episodes were formulaic and predictable, with the Turtles battling the same villains over and over again. The animation quality was not consistent, with some episodes looking much cheaper than others. And while the humor was a big part of the show's appeal, some of the jokes may come across as a bit cringy to modern audiences, but you can't really hold that against it. The 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon is a classic that still holds up as a fun and entertaining watch for all ages. It had a significant impact on popular culture, as it helped to establish the franchise as a household name. The show's distinctive style and humor influenced subsequent TMNT adaptations and even other cartoons.
Babies? These things haven't even been born yet.
Its success also paved the way for other animated series based on comic book properties, helping to legitimize the medium as a viable platform for storytelling. It might be a bit controversial to rank it higher than the original, but we're giving the gold medal of TMNT cartoons and movies to Nickelodeon's 2012 cartoon series. The 2012 Nickelodeon TMNT series was a well-received reboot of the franchise, bringing fresh energy to the series. One of the standout features of the show was its attention to character development. Each of the Turtles was given a unique personality and backstory, making making them more relatable and three-dimensional than in previous iterations of the franchise. The show also explored the relationships between the Turtles and their allies such as April O'Neil and Casey Jones, as well as their enemies such as the Shredder and his Foot Clan. The action scenes in the show were expertly crafted, featuring a blend of martial arts, acrobatics, and sci-fi gadgets. The fight choreography was well thought out and executed, making for exciting and visually impressive battles. The show also made use of creative camera angles and special effects to enhance the action scenes. The show's writers also did a great job of balancing humor and drama.
Sorry, TC. Personal pocket pizza for you?
The show could be silly and lighthearted at times, but also had plenty of emotional depth and serious moments. This helped to keep the show engaging and relatable for viewers of all ages. Overall, the 2012 Nickelodeon TMNT series was a well-crafted reboot of the franchise that successfully brought new life to the beloved characters. Its strong character development, well-crafted action scenes, and clever blend of humor and drama made it a standout entry in the TMNT canon.
Ask anyone who grew up in the 1980s, and they probably know everything about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In 2012, Nickelodeon rebooted the series, bringing back old favorites while also creating new mutants for our favorite heroes in a half shell to both fight beside and fight against. But in this reboot, who are the most heroic and honorable, and who are the most vile villains? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012, Good to Evil. As already stated, this series had a ton of characters, with some being new interpretations of characters from other incarnations, and some being completely original. As such, we're going to focus on the ones who were the most memorable or who left the most impact. Unfortunately, we won't be including any of the 80s characters that came to visit during the Series 2 crossovers. We also won't be including Usagi Yojimbo or any of the characters from his world, as this list is strictly focused on the 2012 universe. With that out of the way, let's get into it. As usual, we'll be starting with the most pure and noble characters and working our way down. These characters are the good. Our gold medal of good goes to the turtle who's one of a kind, Michelangelo. While not always the most serious of the group, it can easily be said that Mikey is the heart of the team. He tries to keep his brothers in good spirits by cracking jokes, but is still able to focus when he needs to. Beyond being comic relief, Mikey really does care for others and is able to be patient and supportive. He was able to get Leatherhead to calm down and open up to him through offering him food and kind words.
I bet the first thing he's gonna do is thank...
He was also able to calm Raph down after it seemed like Master Splinter was killed in the Season 2 finale. Additionally, Mikey is the friendliest of the Turtles, able to form friendships with characters like the mutant frog Napoleon and later on Mondo Gecko. Any friendship he offers is genuine and he's willing to see the best in people. He's also had some pretty massive wins, like when he saved the world by figuring out how to fix the seal of the Ancients and defeat Cavaxis.
Your new boss, Mikey, commands you!
A win like that gets you a ton of heroic points. That being said, Mikey isn't perfect. He sometimes messes with Donnie's things when bored, which often has mixed results. Sometimes he creates happy accidents like Ice Cream Kitty or the perfected retro mutagen, and other times he ends up giving himself mutant acne that nearly makes him explode. And he also sometimes makes a mess of things, like when he trashed the farmhouse and then ran away instead of cleaning. Still, given that he's a 15-year-old who has to deal with killer mutants and almost world-ending disasters on a near weekly basis, you can't really blame him for wanting to cut loose at times. And these instances don't take away from the kind heart that he has or the hero that he can be when he puts his mind to it. What matches better with silver than the color blue? In second place, we have Leonardo. As the leader of the group, Leo does his best to follow the teachings of his sensei. He also does whatever he can to both lead his team to victory and protect his family when they're in danger. This has even included being willing to sacrifice his own life. You can't get more noble than that. However, while some like Raph may call him perfect, Leo has his own faults. When it comes to his status as leader, he can sometimes be prideful and stubborn, often taking unnecessary risks, like in the Season 2 finale when he ran off to fight Shredder on his own. He's also more willing to sneak around his family when it comes comes to his crush, later revealed to be his sister Karai. In Season 4's Broken Foot, he hit a bit of a rebellious phase when he decided to go with Karai and Shingami to torch the Shredder's various hideouts.
We're outnumbered. We need help.
Unfortunately, Leo choosing not to tell his brothers about it resulted in them getting caught in the crosshairs and Donnie getting seriously hurt. Still, even with those not-so-great moments on his record, Leo has plenty of honor and morality. He works hard not just for praise, but so he can protect the city and the people he loves. Not a perfect leader, but pretty close. In third place, we have the Fugitoid, also known as Professor Zayton Honeycutt. After the Triceratons activated the black hole generator, destroying the Earth, it was the Fugitoid that was able to give the turtles a second chance to save their home. Now, let's address the mutant elephant in the room. Yes, Professor Honeycutt did create the Heart of Darkness after the Krang offered him enough money to continue his research, a fact that, when revealed to our heroes, devastated them.
You lied to us. Everything was a lie.
But to say that Fugitoid regrets this is a huge understatement. Throughout the first half of the 4th season, we see him do all he can to help the turtles recover the pieces and destroy the weapon once and for all. He also refused to repeat his mistakes when the Triceratons came to him for weapons, hence why he's now just a brain. After rescuing the turtles and taking them into the past, he became one of their most trusted allies, saving them time and time again, ultimately resulting in him sacrificing his own life to assure that the Heart of Darkness could never be used again. With all of that in mind, no pun intended, the story of the Fugitoid shows that even after making a bad choice, it's never too late to make things right. Next we have Leatherhead. Originally thought to be a monster, this mutant alligator has a surprising soft side. In his introduction, we learn that he was mutated and tortured by the Krang, and wants nothing more than to destroy them. He also has blackouts due to his rage issues and often regrets the things he's done afterwards. Thankfully, Mikey is able to see past his rough exterior to see the kind soul underneath. While certainly a powerhouse on the battlefield, Leatherhead is also extremely protective of his friends. In his debut episode, he's willing to distract the Krang and refuses to tell them where the turtles or the power cell they're after are, making him come off as very loyal.
I will deal with the Krang.
Later on, he's able to warn the turtles about an incoming invasion, again putting himself at risk to help his friends, and even offers to stay in Dimension X to hold the Krang off. Throughout the series, Leatherhead is shown to be one of the turtles' strongest and most trustworthy allies, proving that you shouldn't judge a book by its leather-bound cover. Just underneath him, we have Dr. Tyler Rockwell, a neurochemist turned chimpanzee. He possesses the powers of telepathy and telekinesis like April. When he first appeared, he wasn't in complete control of himself. It was quickly discovered that his hostility was more out of fear than actual malice. Later on, he becomes a valued member of the Mighty Mutanimals, his intellect being enough to rival Donnie's. Though not much of a fighter when compared to teammates Leatherhead and Slash, Dr. Rockwell isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He did briefly fight against the turtles, but that was due to being infected with a mind worm, something that also happened to Slash and Raph. The main reasoning for him being this high up is that despite a rough start, Dr. Rockwell was a good example of a logic-minded hero, being someone morally sound and not really having any black marks to mention. At the same time, he's not the most outgoing mutant, often sticking with his team instead of going out on patrol like the turtles do, and not doing anything extraordinarily heroic. So we can't really place him any higher either. Next up is Agent Bishop. Unlike the Krang, who are interested in mass mutation and taking over worlds, the Utrum are peaceful.
I am not here to fight you.
And as such, Agent Bishop has helped the turtles fight against both the Krang and the Triceratons, breaking his vow of not dealing with earthly matters. While his personality can sometimes come off as cold, he does care about his allies and his people, though is sometimes a stickler for the rules. But even when he was concerned about Raph keeping Chompy Picasso, a baby alien turtle, Bishop is still willing to fight alongside the turtles, protecting them against General Griffin and the Earth Protection Force. Up next is the time-traveling apprentice, Renee Tilly. While she didn't make too many appearances in the series, this timestress is certainly a memorable one. Still just an apprentice, she can sometimes be careless or immature. However, whenever she does make a mistake, she's more than willing to do all she can to fix it and fights well alongside the so-called turtle warriors of legend. Now, time travel can be tricky, so bear with us, but technically she's also the reason why the turtles even exist.
It's just a little quantum manipulation.
During one of their time-traveling adventures, Renee left the turtles in late 90s Japan so that they could save Splinter, then known as Hamato Yoshi, from a fire that would have killed him otherwise. It's kind of hard to deny an impact like that, even if it was the turtles doing most of the work in that instance. Renee may only be a time master in training, but she's still a hero to us. Next is the guy who has a way with machines, Donatello. Donnie is the team genius, as well as the team medic and team mechanic. Time and time again, his gadgets help save the day. His father once called him a thoughtful soul, and many fans think of him as the adorkable nerd. But while certainly a hero, he has sometimes made some questionable moral decisions. While he didn't do so on purpose, it was his influence that made Timothy, or Mutagen Man, become obsessed with April. While Donnie regretted this, it was still Timothy that paid the price, remaining frozen for the rest of the series. Then there's his crush on April. While sometimes it's sweet, other times it's, well, a bit creepy.
There's a creature out there trying to hurt my April.
Like the time he thought he could use Metalhead to stare at her without her noticing, or how he often argued with Casey over who deserved her. Finally, during the Kavaxis saga in Season 5, we see Donnie being willing to murder Don Vizioso. He was also so blinded by revenge that he put his team's mission at risk, and while you can understand his anger towards the man, you still can't help but think he's just a bit too young for murder.
This is the end.
Ultimately, Donnie decided against killing the Don and instead left him for police, which saves him from sliding any lower. While thoughtful and intelligent, he doesn't always make the best choices and can even be selfish at times. But at his core, Donnie is still our hero in purple, using both brains and brawn to save the day. Speaking of New York's most famous girl in yellow, we have April O'Neil just below Donnie. Once upon a time, she was just a normal teenager who just so happened to have aliens coming after her, which is always a bummer. As the series went on, however, April learned just how extraordinary she was and used her new telepathy powers and abilities to become a kunoichi, or female ninja. She's resourceful, determined, and just as tough as any turtle. While she did have a falling out with the turtles in Season 2 after a mistake on their part caused her father to be mutated, she still considers them her family and best friends.
You mutated my father!
But when it comes to Donnie, it's complicated. Of course, there would be nothing wrong with her turning the guy down, but given that she never gives Donnie a clear answer, often making him even more confused, even after he tries to respect her feelings and back off, is questionable. In Season 4, we also see her start to grow more mentally unstable due to the Aeon Crystal she found during their space adventures. She becomes more hostile, more ruthless, and even disintegrates Donnie at one point. Of course, she's able to free herself from the crystal's influence without going full Dark Phoenix. But it should still be said that April might not have gone that far if she had listened to others' concerns in the first place.
No, it's mine! I need it!
Given that she regretted her actions and that she wasn't in full control at the time, we can forgive her brief power trip. As a character, she's anything but ordinary, and by the end of the series, we can see that she's truly grown to be a hero in her own right. Every student needs a teacher, and every turtle needs a rat dad, apparently. Up next is Master Splinter, also known as Hamato Yoshi. A father to 4, Splinter tries to instill a sense of honor within his sons. He teaches them and April the art of ninjutsu. Originally protective of them, he quickly sees their potential and encourages them to protect the city from villains. As the wise master, he can sometimes be very stern with his sons, especially if they lie lie to him or if they put their mission at risk. When he's angry at them for blowing their cover in The Noxious Avenger, he has no issues with roughing them up a bit.
How could you all be so careless?
He even puts a sword through their TV, really taking grounding to the next level. You also have to wonder if sending your kids out to fight a war that started before they were even born is good parenting. April even brings this up in the season 1 finale, asking him why he isn't out there fighting with the turtles instead of staying at the lair. To his credit, we do start to see Splinter become more active during certain missions later on in the series. Other characters like Raphael have also brought up his possible favoritism towards Leonardo, given that Splinter is often seen spending the most time with him, praises him the most, and teaches him special techniques without even asking the others if they'd like to learn too. He also puts a lot of pressure on Leo to be the leader, even when Leo thought about quitting the position in season 1. Though he may not be the world's best dad, he's still a pretty good dad. He clearly loves all of his kids, including Karai. He teaches them lessons that they're able to use both in life and on the battlefield, and he never hesitates to come to their rescue even when they frustrate him. We finally come to the last of our half-shell heroes, the hothead Raphael. Raph can be brash, harsh, and rude. While it's normal for siblings to sometimes argue and trash talk, he can sometimes take it to a whole new level and even becomes physical at times.
I think hitting is gonna help. I'll work faster.
This can definitely make him come off as a bully, but he's really more of a jerk with a heart of gold. While his brothers may drive him crazy, Raph is always there for them and is willing to take the hardest hits so they don't have to. Though he may make fun of Donnie's crush on April, he also made an effort to talk him up in front of her and even tried to cheer him up when it seemed like Donnie's feelings weren't reciprocated. He's also been shown to comfort Mikey when he needs it. When his former pet Spike, now Slash, asked him to abandon his brothers, he refused and was willing to take his friend down to protect his family.
That's what real friends do. They stand up for each other.
Speaking of which, the guy has a huge soft spot for animals. From Spike to the pigeons he's tamed to Chompy Picasso, Raphael can be gentle and nurturing to the creatures that he cared for. He still falls a bit low given how mean and even violent he can be, but at his core, he loves his family and is a hero. He just has a hard time expressing his nicer side. Right below Raph is his vigilante best friend, Casey Jones. Like Raphael, Casey can be quick to anger, which can lead him to being careless in fights and sometimes even unnecessarily brutal. Originally, he became a vigilante to protect April and his family from the freaks of the world.
This is Casey Jones versus evil robo-ninjas.
Once he realized he and the Turtles were on the same side, he did calm down slightly. Still, Casey is a fighter at heart, and while he fights for justice, he isn't afraid to break a few rules or a few bones, as long as it means getting gangs like the Purple Dragons off the streets. Still, he can be sensitive and empathetic when he wants to be. He's protective of his friends, can sometimes be a good listener, and was even willing to put his rivalry with Donatello aside to save him from being possessed by Speed Demon. Like the Turtles and April, he wants to be a hero to his city and his team. Mona Lisa was a Salamandrian warrior, lieutenant of the Salamandrian Air Fleet, and fights alongside her commander. Her species fights against the Triceratons and focuses on being honorable in battle.
Now you will fight us!
While she wasn't originally interested in him, even being hostile, she quickly formed a bond with Raphael after seeing how much of a noble and skilled fighter he was. Even when she was still refusing to work together with him, she still shot her blaster at the ice underneath Raph rather than at him. Kind of a low bar, but hey, baby steps. Later on, however, she ended up betraying Raph and the rest of his team, leading them all into a trap set up by Lord Dreg. She did this to save her homeworld, but it was still devastating for Raph, who nearly lost his will to fight. Still, she regrets this choice and more than makes up for it, helping the Turtles escape and then helping them fight Dreg's forces again later on Earth.
Go!
Save your world!
She even decides to stay on Earth with Raph, becoming not just a long-distance ally, but a romantic partner. And rounding out our good list, we have Mondo Gecko. Along with being another member of the Mighty Mutanimals, he's also another character that didn't leave the best first impression. After becoming a mutant and getting kicked out by his parents, he was taken in by Fishface, who instilled in him an attitude of always only looking out for himself. This led to him being careless and selfish, even laughing when Casey nearly fell off a building. Thankfully, Mikey was able to open his eyes to not only Fishface's true nature, but also to being a better person.
Sorry about all this, dudes.
Though not the strongest or the most heroic Gecko, Mondo still tries to help out when he can. And with that said, that's it for the good characters. Now it's time to descend into neutral territory. This is the gray area. At the very top of our gray list, we have the final member of the Mighty Mutanimals, Slash. Originally a pet tortoise named Spike, Slash made quite an impact after being mutated.
We may need to lose some dead weight.
While Raph was happy to have him around, Slash was more focused on taking out the other turtles, believing that Raph would be better off without them. Make no mistake, Slash was intending to kill the other brothers and even Raph at one point, not just beat them up. Really, it's no wonder Leo struggled with trusting him afterwards. Before forming the Mutanimals, Slash also aligned himself with the Neutralizer, which turned out to be a mistake, with Neutralizer being even more ruthless than Slash. Thankfully, after realizing that Raph was still his friend, Slash turned his life around and became a true hero. Still, it's hard to forget a first impression as violent as his, so we'll put him just on the edge of goodness, but still in the gray. Next up is the Kunoichi that needs no introduction, Karai. Early on in the series, she and Leo had this whole Batman and Catwoman thing going on. She could be sneaky and manipulative, but she wasn't necessarily evil. Leo certainly saw the good in her, and even after accusing him of lying to her about her true father, Karai still refused to slay Leo. While she did follow the orders of her adopted father, Oroku Sakai, she was willing to lie to keep the turtles safe, still keeping a sense of honor.
I can lead Tiger Claw away!
However, even after accepting the truth about Saki and Splinter, Karai still tended to focus on her own goals and wants over others. She wanted to defeat Shredder, but she wanted to do it in her own way. Granted, she didn't always get the opportunity to do good between getting captured, mutated, captured again, and finally brainwashed. Yeah, it was a whole thing. She did save her father, her real father, from drowning in the season 2 finale, so that was nice. In the end, while she didn't get to be the one to kill the Shredder, Karai did decide to create her own Foot Clan instead of joining the Hamato clan, in the hope of bringing honor back to the Foot. With all of the back and forth there was with her, we feel that Karai is best suited for the upper half of the gray area. Just underneath Karai is her right-hand woman, Shinigami. Much of what you can say about Karai, you can also say about her. She's a mystical witch who can be pretty cunning and arrogant, as well as a bit of a trickster.
Let's play a game.
The first time we saw her, she was antagonizing April to the point of stealing her weapon. She had no problems stealing laundered money with the Shredder, but she didn't argue when Leo and Karai decided to burn it instead. She'll often follow Karai's lead, never really questioning her and being completely loyal to her senpai. As such, she can also be very caring and protective towards her. Later on, this extends to the rest of Karai's family, and she even asks April to forgive her. Next we have Timothy, also known as the Pulverizer. Yes, Timothy. Poor Timothy. Starting as a simple fanboy, he tried his best to be a hero like the Turtles. While Donnie did try to teach him some ninjutsu, Timothy just didn't have the skill for it.
I don't have time for the basics. Show me the good stuff.
He was clumsy, bumbling, and more of a burden than anything else. Still, he helped get Donnie and Raph after Raph was poisoned by Fishface. This would have been a nice win for him if not for him causing the team to lose their Krang power cell just a few moments before. Bummer. Later on, he tried to act as an undercover spy, becoming part of the Foot in order to learn their secrets. When Timothy learns that he has a chance to become mutated like the Turtles, he takes a chance despite Donnie's warnings.
Doing the mutation thing is notoriously notoriously unpredictable.
Unfortunately, Timothy becomes an abomination, turning into nothing more than a bunch of ooze and organs. He briefly becomes obsessed with April and is willing to hurt others to keep her all for himself. At this point, his mind is nearly gone and he has to be frozen in order to keep him from hurting anyone. Donnie promises to figure out a way to unfreeze and unmutate him, but this never comes to fruition. Timothy definitely wasn't a hero, but he wasn't a villain either. He was just a kid who wanted to be a hero, but his own foolishness and eagerness just got in the way. One of the biggest tragedies seen in the show. Muckman, formerly Garson Grunge, received a similar and very disgusting fate. He's easily manipulated both by his partner, Eyeball Joe, and by Bebop and Rocksteady. Although he tries to be a hero at first, he's also willing to steal if it means finding a cure for his mutation. He also blames the turtles for becoming a pile of living garbage and tries to take out his anger on them.
Who did this to me?
Once he learns the truth, Muckman apologizes and decides to help hide the turtles' identities as mutant ninjas by telling the news that they were just guys in costumes.
Title mutants? Nah, no such thing.
While he's not quite the noxious Avenger that the news claimed he was, he does do enough to keep himself out of the bad tier. Finally, at the end of our gray list, we have Alopix. This speedy ninja is only after one thing, and that's revenge against her brother Takashi, aka Tiger Claw. Though they were once close, they've since had a falling out, with Alopix blaming him for ruining her life and turning her into an assassin. Before her debut episode, she was the one who took Tiger Claw's tail and was planning on taking his life.
You hang my tail like a trophy?
In the end, however, she acknowledged that he was the only family she had left and decided to spare him. After Tiger Claw decided to waste this chance, she cut off his hand and warned him that she wouldn't be as merciful next time. Although she was only focused on revenge, she never tried to seriously hurt the turtles and was willing to help break the curse that she had put on Casey, showing that she no longer wanted to take innocent lives. And that wraps up our gray area. Now it's time to look at the henchmen, the villains, and the galactic destroyers. These are the bad and the evil. It really isn't easy being Baxter Stockman, from being mocked and people forgetting his name to becoming subservient to the Shredder. You can't help but feel just a little bad for this man turned bug. Still, even before his life started going downhill, the guy was a bit of a jerk and was willing to destroy and threaten just to make a name for himself and get revenge on those who made fun of him.
So, we'll call it a tie?
Despite his lack of success in the role, Stockman was more than happy to play the role of villain, always hoping to get the upper hand over those who were always putting him down. Things don't get much better for him after he becomes a fly. He helps Shredder with various projects like the Mind Worms and eventually Shredder's own super mutation. In the Insecta Trifecta, he did manage to strike out on his own with a couple of bug sidekicks. He even caught Karai, April, and Leonardo and had planned on using them to feed his bugs.
They'll never get past us, my insect brothers.
That's pretty unhinged, but Baxter as a whole isn't quite as evil as some of Shredder's other henchmen. For all of his abuse, he does get a happy ending when Mikey hits him with retro mutagen. But as it turns out, Stockman actually liked being a fly. Go figure. You can't have a TMNT series without Bebop and Rocksteady. These two were villains from the start, being introduced as a master thief and an arms dealer respectively. Though these two could sometimes be a bit goofy, they quickly rose up the ranks in the foot, becoming two of the Turtles' most dangerous opponents. Nothing shows how competent these two can be better than the final crossover of the series, where they very nearly helped the 80s Shredder destroy the world. But after a change of heart, these two ended up saving the day. Afterwards, they decided they wanted to be heroes, but it was more for fame and glory than any moral reason.
Maybe we become superheroes instead.
In any case, these two have done way too much to even hope to be in the gray tier, let alone the good. Still, you have to give them credit for turning over a new leaf in the end. Next up is Fishface. Originally one of Shredder's top henchmen, he was also part of the Brazilian mob, was a master thief, and even made his own weapons. Like the rest of Shredder's henchmen, he had no problems with committing crimes, or even threatening teenage Teenage Turtles. He was also willing to let fellow henchman Chris Bradford die when the Turtles threatened to drop him off a building if Murakami wasn't released.
He's not my friend.
In Baxter's Gambit, he was also willing to assist Raphael in order to free them both, but was also just as quickly willing to betray him. While he was kind towards Mondo Gecko after his parents kicked him out, he also clearly only saw Mondo as an errand boy and didn't truly care for him. It's only towards the end of the series, during the Cavaxis saga, that Fishface finally does something redeemable, revealing the Foot cultists' weakness to the Turtles before leaving the Foot altogether. But this is somewhat hindered given that he still plans on being a criminal.
I want to go back to a nice life of crime, stealing stuff.
Wrapping up the last of the lower tier henchmen is Chris Bradford, also known as Dog Pound. Unlike Bebop, Rocksteady, and Fishface, who all had some small good moments, Bradford is pretty much all bad. He was already pretty unlikable in his first episode, New Friend Old Enemy, when he used Mikey for his own gain and betrayed him, when all Mikey wanted to do was make a human friend. Unfortunately, it just gets worse from there. Each new mutation warps his mind even further, and he seems to enjoy being cruel to the Turtles and Baxter Stockman. Honestly, it's no wonder this guy was eventually sent to the Netherworld alongside the Super Shredder and Cavaxis. Still, he's not the worst, not because he has any saving graces, but because everyone else on this list is much worse. Up next is a member of rodent royalty, the Rat King. Along with just being creepy and disturbing, the Rat King is known for being unhinged and power hungry. He had hoped to take over New York with his army of rats, and even took control of Splinter, forcing him to fight against his sons. He enjoys tormenting Splinter, constantly insisting that he is no longer Yamoto Yoshi, but a rat that should bow to his king.
Bow before your master, rat.
But even before becoming the Rat King, he was a pretty cruel guy. In the episode Monkey Brains, we meet the man who would become the Rat King, Dr. Victor Falco. While trying to gain psychic powers, he forced experiments on his colleague, Dr. Rockwell, and mutated him into a chimp against his will.
You are always so dramatic.
Of course, Dr. Falco showed no remorse over this, only wanting power. However, after an accident involving some mutagen and some fire, Falco becomes even more unhinged. Then, later on, in Of Rats and Men, he starts sending his rats after humans again, only this time he doesn't just want to enslave them, but make them his test subjects. Although he dies in this episode, the impact that he leaves on the characters, especially Splinter, never really goes away. Don Vizioso is next on the list. While not as strong as Shredder in terms of power, having a whole mob on your side is nothing to sneeze at. As a Don, he also isn't afraid to resort to threats, blackmail, or even physical assault to get what he wants. Now, normally, just being a part of the mob would be bad enough, but what makes Don Vizioso even more dangerous is his hatred towards mutants. In Mutant Gangland, we see that he and his gang have equipped themselves with weapons to specifically take out mutants.
Taking over this town will be a piece of cake.
He also kidnaps Donatello and Mondo Gecko, nearly dissecting them. Keep in mind, these are 15-year-olds. If trying to dissect a kid doesn't get you pretty far down the bad list, I don't know what will. Also, not to make things too biblical or anything, but he certainly encapsulates the sin of gluttony. He was even willing to eat the Super Shredder's heart to gain the Shredder's power. That's both evil and disgusting. It's time for Tiger Claw, everyone's favorite kitty bounty hunter. In terms of henchmen, you can't get much better than this Tomcat. He rivals Shredder's other henchmen in strength and outmatches them in skill, not to mention his arsenal of deadly weapons.
Surrender, reptiles!
The only reason why he hasn't taken over the Foot is because he's completely loyal to his master, even bringing Shredder back to life after he was killed. Unfortunately, that's the only person he's loyal to. She's cruel towards Karai, more than happy to turn her in when she protects her brothers, and was even willing to kill his sister after she spared him. Being a bounty hunter often requires a cold heart, and Tiger Claw has that in spades. He does have his limits though, being shocked when Shredder decided that his revenge against Splinter was more important than saving the world in the Season 4 finale.
Shredder, what What have you done?
Still, he's never defied the Shredder, and his lack of redeeming qualities makes him a villain through and through. Looking back at the Turtles' adventures in space, next is Armagon, yet another bounty hunter and assassin that seemed to give the Turtles nothing but trouble. Unlike Tiger Claw, this guy is wanted in 87 different star systems. Not gonna lie, that's pretty impressive. Throughout the space arc, Armagon is constantly after our heroes, working together with Lord Dreg. Although Dreg instructs him to take the Turtles alive, if only so Dreg can watch their deaths in person, Armagon still doesn't make it easy on our heroes.
I'm the one calling the shots here. So move!
He also gets a laugh out, specifically beating Raphael up in The Evil of Dreg, after Raph becomes too easy to fight, and was willing to help give Dreg control of the deadliest weapon in existence, the Heart of Darkness. Some villains are motivated by revenge or a twisted sense of humor. Others just have fun being a villain.
I'm gonna enjoy this.
But Armagon just wants a paycheck, and as long as you're willing to pay him for his work, he'll do or destroy just about anything you tell him to. The Neutralizer was a Salamandrian war criminal that had a nasty tendency of eating anyone in his way, especially if they're pink and squishy. He hates both the Kerrang and the Utrum, not believing that the Utrum are good. While anyone who fights the Kerrang earns 1 or 2 good points, these points are just as quickly dashed by just how ruthless the Neutralizer can be when it comes to his goals and literal hunger for revenge.
I'm gonna eat your brain.
This reaches a new level in When Worlds Collide, where he teams up with Lord Dreg to destroy the Utrum High Council, not caring if the rest of Earth and millions of innocent people fall with it. He also disintegrates Mikey, and while it was revealed that Mikey survived, we still count this as attempted murder. That alone puts him near the end of our villains list. It's time to get weird. Worm begins our top 5. Although more chaotic than straight evil, Worm is still very dangerous. Though he's officially known as one of the 3 really bending creators of chaos, he's more like a twisted genie, offering anyone he meets 3 wishes.
So what's it gonna be?
But once those wishes are spent, Worm is freed from his prison and able to use all of his powers to twist the galaxy into whatever he wants. We get a taste of this in his debut episode, watching him happily destroy planet after planet before Casey is able to wish him back into his prison. He doesn't seem to care who gets hurt by his antics, he just wants to do things his way. While not the most evil, he's possibly the most threatening out of all the villains, given his power level and that you really can't fight him. You can only trick him back into his box. Just missing out on the evil podium is none other than the Shredder, Oroku Saki. Like many other characters in TMNT 2012, Shredder is driven by revenge. What makes him different than others, however, is just how far he's willing to go to kill the man who he claims took everything from him, and he eventually succeeds twice.
I have claimed my victory.
He has no qualms about killing teenagers either, and for the first few seasons, his only redeeming quality was that he cared about his adopted daughter, Karai. Still, even this relationship was built on lies. When Karai found the truth, Shredder wanted nothing more than to control her. While he didn't mean to mutate her into a snake, he still refused to take responsibility for it. Later on, he tried to brainwash her by using mind worms. When that failed, Shredder was willing to rid himself of any affection he still had for Karai just so he wouldn't have to worry about her getting in his way. By the end of the series, Shredder had gone completely mad, becoming nothing more than a heartless, power-crazed monster. So why only put him in 4th place? Well, Shredder may be a threat to the Himoto clan, but for the most part, he isn't usually a global threat, unlike the following. We're giving both Lord Dreg and Captain Mozar our bronze medal. While they are different enough as characters, their threat levels, purposes in the show's storyline, and motivations are similar enough that having Dreg and Mozar in separate spots would just be too repetitive. Dreg is an alien crime lord who considers himself the ruler of all insects, while Mozar is the leader of the Triceraton fleet. Both of them have threatened to kill the turtles multiple times. With Dreg specifically, the turtles didn't have to do much to earn his anger. When they first met, the only offense they committed was accidentally knocking him down down and not knowing who he was. Though this certainly makes Dreg seem petty, he's still very much a threat. As stated earlier, he's teamed up with several other villains throughout the series while also being powerful in his own right by having an army of bugs at his disposal. In The Evil of Dreg, we see that he has enough power to threaten the Salamandrian homeworld, and even after Mona Lisa does everything Dreg asks, he still decides to invade the planet anyway, though he seems to be defeated for good a few times. Just like a stubborn cockroach, he just keeps coming back.
No fair! No fair!
Ultimately, this results in him coming to Earth in the second part of When Worlds Collide. He not only plans to take over the planet, but also use humans as his egg sacs. Honestly, even if the turtles had done something to deserve Dreg's revenge, his actions would still be no less evil and heartless. As for Captain Mozar, he cares even less about the planet Earth, only seeing its destruction as a means to get rid of the Krang once and for all.
Let us be done with these pests.
He's brutal, cunning, and refuses to let the TMNT stand in the way of his mission, being more than willing to put up a fight in order to get all of the pieces of the Heart of Darkness. Both of these guys more than deserve this spot on our list. Now for the Silver Medal of Evil, it goes to an entire species, the Krang. These guys were here from the beginning, long before Splinter and the Turtles even. They kidnapped members of April's family, experimenting on them in the hopes of using them for their master plan, turning the planet Earth into a copy of Dimension X and taking it over.
Krang shall dominate the Earth!
Through their devastating mutagen, these guys have turned countless lives upside down and traumatizing dozens. They don't care about who they hurt, they just want their planet. While it's nice to know that there's a good version of these guys with the Utrum, it doesn't really change just how much devastation they've caused throughout the series. From kidnapping and enslavement, to torture and experimentation on innocent creatures and even children, to bringing about a mutant apocalypse in an alternate future, there's only one character who could be worse. Earning the Gold Medal of Evil is Cavaxis. Although he was only around for a few episodes, you can't underestimate just how evil this guy is, to the point where even Shredder realized how necessary it was to defeat him. To be fair, the guy is a demon. It's hard to get much more evil than that.
These mortals are not worth my time.
He's the lord of the Demodragons, a species from the Netherworld. For those not in the know, Demodragons are demons that bring about disaster to the world. Though he pretended to be subservient to Tiger Claw, Cavaxis was secretly planning on opening up the Netherworld and using this connection to take over Earth with an army of ghosts. It was only through some quick thinking on Mikey's part that he was eventually defeated. Had it not been for that, the Earth would have been doomed. And it's scary to think just how close Cavaxis was to winning, being the most powerful enemy the Turtles had ever faced. He's also the most evil.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle franchise is no stranger to dark subject material and gruesome moments, be it through the comics, the movies, or even the cartoons. Although the 2003 cartoon was able to get quite a few things past the picky for kids censors, it was the 2012 series on Nickelodeon that really pushed the limits of what a TMNT cartoon could get away with. I'm Anthony with Wicked Binge, and this is TMNT 2012 Moments. Gruesome to most gruesome. Alright, let's get started with the least gruesome and work our way up to the most gruesome. First, we have Tiger Claw loses a hand. You know you're in for a wild ride when someone losing part of a limb is somehow the least gruesome moment in a show. However, because Tiger Claw was the only family she had left, Alopex decided to spare him.
Next time, there is no mercy.
Tiger Claw, being the smart guy he is, decided it would be a genius move to waste his sister's gesture and try to shoot her. For this, Alopex takes his hand and warns him that if he tries something like that again, there will be no next time. So why exactly is this moment at the bottom of our list? Well, for starters, because of Alopex's speed, it happens so quickly that it fails to have as much impact as it could have had. There doesn't seem to be any emotional trauma from it, and in terms of physical, we see that he's completely fine the next time he shows up, now having a cool metal hand as a replacement. Not even the Turtles are too shocked by this moment, with Raph even making a crack about it only seconds after it happens.
And he'll never be able to clap again.
While still technically gruesome, it just doesn't stand up to other moments in the series. Next up is Raph's leadership fail. In the episode New Girl in Town, Leo gets fed up with Raph constantly criticizing the way he leads the team and decides to make Raph the new leader. Although Raph happily takes up this position, it doesn't take him too long to realize there's much more to being a leader than giving orders. When the Turtles discover Snakeweed's lair, they engage in a battle with him and end up getting in way over their heads. When it comes to actual strategies, the only plan Raph can seem to come up with is go for the head. Things take a turn for the worse when a bad call causes Mikey to get knocked unconscious. This moment is twofold in terms of gruesomeness. Firstly, the hit that Mikey takes in the scene is pretty hard, knocking him out for the rest of the episode. It's one of the first times in the series where we see one of the turtles get seriously hurt. But what really sells this moment is the clear panic Raph has on his face after it happens, with him not knowing if his brother is okay or what to do next. Although the moment may seem small in the grand scheme of things, it definitely still leaves an impact on both Raph and the audience. Up next, we have the Shredder's first strike. Of course, we just had to give a shout out the moment where the Turtles meet the Shredder for the first time. This moment comes at the tail end of the gauntlet, with the Turtles celebrating yet another victory. They're feeling pretty confident until a certain Shredhead turns up. From there, the Shredder takes on each of the Turtles, defeating each one of them. At one point, Mikey even nearly gets crushed by a piece of the building's sign, and shortly afterwards, the Shredder has a blade to Leo's throat. The Turtles just barely make it out of this fight alive, thanks to a bit of distraction from the newly mutated Dog Pound and Fish Face. Still, the battle leaves the Turtles bruised, battered, broken, and humbled. Additionally, the story of the show shifts from this moment on. Like Splinter says, they are now at war.
We are at war.
Now, you may be asking, why exactly is this admittedly pretty brutal and significant moment so low on the list? Honestly, there's nothing wrong with the moment itself. It's just that, as we get further into the series, there are much more brutal and gruesome moments to come, with this moment essentially just acting as a taste of what we, the audience, can expect from the Shredder. So yeah, buckle up everybody, it's only gonna get more brutal from here. Moving on to the mutation of Baxter Stockman. From the beginning of the series, Baxter Stockman was treated as, well, a total joke. We're pretty sure that everyone was expecting this guy to get mutated eventually once the Shredder got a hold of him, and that moment finally came in Season 2. But credit where it's due, despite it being pretty expected, a decent amount of tension is built for the moment, which really helps it in terms of gruesomeness. We see the Shredder finally get fed up with Stockman's failures, and rather than letting Razar beat him up, Shredder presses the button for Stockman's ooze-filled collar. There's a small delay, and then boom, the ooze is released. We don't see what his mutation actually looks like until later on in the episode, but seeing the mutation process start and hearing Stockman panicked and in pain is still more than enough to leave an impact. The guy may be a bit of an evil creep, but in this instance at least, you can't really help but feel bad for poor Baxter Stockman. Next up is Slash Rex Mikey. Although Slash eventually came around and became a hero, it really is hard to forget his absolutely brutal introduction. After being mutated, Slash decides to become Raph's partner and insists that together they can clean up the city. Little does Raph know, his brothers aren't included in these plans.
We may need to lose some dead weight.
Although we don't see Slash take out Donnie on screen, we do see just how brutal the former Pet Tortoise's methods are when he runs into Raph and Mikey. The way that Slash knocks Mikey around, hard enough to make him bounce when he hits the ground, is, let's face it, pretty terrifying. This is only one moment in the episode, with the big fight between Raph and Slash not happening until later. While that is a pretty brutal and emotionally charged fight in its own right, we decided to go with the earlier moment for our ranking, with the shocking nature of it, along with just how violent it is, making it much more gruesome. Next we have Explosion Gone Wrong. In the Season 4 episode, Broken Foot, Leo begins sneaking off with Karai and Shinigami to try and take out the Shredder's resources. Naturally, the other turtles soon become suspicious of their leader's behavior and try to follow him, eventually ending up at a chemical factory that's set to explode. While Donnie is able to figure this out and protects Raph and Mikey just in the nick of time, he's unable to protect himself and ends up getting seriously injured. In many ways, this moment is similar to the one with Mikey and Snakeweed, given that they're both knocked out and out of commission for the rest of their respective episodes. However, we had to rank this moment higher due to the spectacle of it. Obviously, Donnie received much more damage from being near an explosion and landing on a car than Mikey did getting thrown into a wall. There was also an added emotional element to this moment, in that Donnie's injuries were indirectly Leo's fault. For these reasons, we decided to give it a fairly decent spot in our ranking. Next is the mutation of Karai. Here we have yet another mutation, albeit one that was much less expected than Stockman's. But like Stockman's mutation, there's plenty of tension that's building up this moment. After a brief fight scene, Leo manages to get to the cage that Karai is being held in and tries to free her. Leo, the Shredder, and Splinter can only helplessly watch as Karai falls into the mutagen, becoming a nearly mindless mutant serpent. Not only does this moment impact Karai and her family, but it also deeply impacts the Shredder of all people, given that he had never planned on actually mutating his so-called daughter and still cared for her at this point. This is another moment that ends up becoming a turning point in the series, with Karai being put out of commission for several episodes due to her new mutation. But as gruesome and shocking as this moment is, there are still two more mutation moments that top it. Our next gruesome moment is the death of Tang Shen. What better way to transition into the upper half of our list than with the show's first on-screen death? When the Turtles travel back to late 90s Japan, they end up meeting past versions of Shredder, Splinter, and Splinter's late wife, Tang Shen. With the backstory of Shen having already been told to us, and this being a time travel story, we all knew that this story was never going to have a happy ending. In the climax of the episode, we see Saki challenge Yoshi in a fight to the death. The two brothers battle it out, refusing to stop even when a fire starts in the family dojo. The fight ends happens when Tang Shen tries to step in between the two, in an attempt to protect her husband. Because of this, Saki ends up accidentally killing Shen, devastating both himself and Yoshi. As vital of a moment as this is, we felt we couldn't put it any higher for a few reasons. Once again, there's no blood or even a visible injury that comes with this attack. We know, it's a kid's show, but just because it's a kid's show doesn't mean they couldn't have thought of a better way to show the impact of the attack. With how the moment plays out, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Saki simply hit Shen, or knocked her out of the way, instead of slashing her with his blades. Additionally, like we said before, this moment was expected. Because it isn't shocking or surprising, it does lose just a bit of impact. Still, while it falls behind in comparison to other gruesome moments from this show, we felt we still had to give it the respect it deserved and give it a decent ranking. Next is the mutation of Kirby O'Neill. In the Season 2 premiere, the Turtles are tasked with taking out a Krang ship filled with mutagen canisters. Unfortunately, this mission goes wrong fast, and the canisters end up dropping all over New York City, leading to multiple mutations throughout the season. One of these mutations happens to be Kirby O'Neill, who ends up mutating into a monstrous and nearly mindless bat creature. Needless to say, this moment is pretty horrifying, with Kirby remaining as a bat for several episodes. Not only that, but April is naturally pretty traumatized from this moment. She's furious at the Turtles for their mistake and refuses to speak to them for weeks.
You mutated my father!
Even after they all become friends again, we see in the episode with the fear fungus that April has actually developed a fear of both bats and her mutated father. With how scary this moment is, and how much of an impact it has on these two characters in the second season, it more than earned its high ranking. Moving on to Karai's near-death experience. Throughout the latter half of Season 4, we see the Shredder descend further into madness, eventually becoming a monster both inside and out. When he's able to regain his strength and detach himself from any emotions involving his former daughter, the new Super Shredder decides it's time to defeat his enemies once and for all. Shredder storms the mighty Mutanimals hideout, taking out the Mutanimals one by one and setting the place on fire. Seriously, what is with this guy and setting fires? Before finally facing Karai. We see the Super Shredder sadistically taunt Karai, telling her that he's going to slay her in the same way he did her mother, and baiting her into an attack. When Karai does charge him, he easily breaks her sword and defeats her, leading to Karai being buried under rubble and left to die. Even when Leo and Splinter get Karai out, it's pretty touch and go. Leo is able to bring her back through CPR, but Karai is left out of commission for both this and the next episode. You really do feel for Karai in this moment, and seeing Shredder take her out without any remorse truly symbolizes how far he's gone. Although not the longest fight in the series, it's still pretty devastating to watch while also having a huge impact, and essentially leads into a moment that we'll get to shortly. Next up is Neutralizer electrifies Mikey. Man, Mikey just can't catch a break, can he? During the Worlds Collide arc of Season 5, we see the Neutralizer return to fight and destroy the Turtles for his new boss, Lord Dreg. Eventually, the group ends up fighting Neutralizer at a power substation. Although April is able to temporarily weaken him with water, the Neutralizer still manages to electrocute and seemingly disintegrate Mikey. Not only is this moment fairly shocking, no pun intended, it's also pretty explosive and certainly looks painful, given how it's slowed down so that we can truly see and hear Mikey's reaction to it. Considering how reminiscent this moment is of another certain moment that we'll get to later, the characters, especially Roth, who gives a pretty awesome line afterwards, are pretty devastated. However, this devastation doesn't seem to last long. For the rest of Part 1 and most of Part 2, it seems like Mikey is truly gone, but the characters don't really seem to focus on it much. You know, despite it looking like Mikey is actually dead. There's even a moment later on, mind you, only a few minutes after his death, where April makes a reference to just how bad Mikey's ideas usually are, before just being like, oh, right, sorry, too soon?
That's like a Mikey level bad idea.
Like, seriously? It's this, plus the fact that Mikey isn't actually dead, that sort of ruins this moment and keeps it from being put any higher. Moving on, we can't forget about Shredder's betrayal. Here we have a moment that's not only gruesome, but shows just how petty the Shredder can be. When the Triceratons invade Earth, the Turtles and their allies are easily outnumbered. As such, they have no choice but to try and team up with the Shredder in order to save the Earth. But, like a true villain, Shredder shows exactly why he shouldn't be trusted. This moment comes just before the black hole generator is activated. With both Splinter and Shredder racing to stop it, it looks like that they're going to stop it just in time. But before Splinter can reach it, Shredder literally stabs him in the back, finally killing him and dooming Earth in the process. A move that even the loyal Tiger Claw calls him out for. Unlike Shen's death, we actually see the Shredder's blades go through Splinter in this scene, making it all the more gruesome and impactful.
Mato Yoshi is finished.
We're sure that shot of Splinter with blades sticking out of him is forever burned into the minds of fans. Really, this was probably the most violent scene that the 2012 crew had done up to that point. Further adding to the weight of this moment is when it looks like all the characters are about to be sucked up into the black hole. Though there's still just a few more moments that we feel top it, we just had to give this moment a high spot. On that note, next up is Shredder vs. Leonardo. Although this moment has been recreated several times throughout TMNT media with both Leonardo and Raphael, the impact of it is nevertheless still there. In the Season 2 finale, we find ourselves watching a very familiar scenario, in which Leonardo is separated from his brothers and is forced to fight wave after wave of Shredder's bots and henchmen before finally fighting Shredder himself.
Stop hiding behind your footbots! Face me, Shredder!
Being, in a sense, the longest moment on this list, you can truly feel the impact of Leo getting worn down, his emotions rising, even as his energy and strength begin to wane. Admittedly, the fights themselves go by fairly quickly, with Rizar, Fishface, and Tiger Claw all getting taken out in only a couple of moves, but because all of the fights are one after the other, the impact is still there. Of course, when the Shredder finally decides to step in, this is where things get truly brutal. Although there's no blood, the implication is certainly there in how we see the Shredder strike, and then cut to an image of Leo being completely shattered. What also puts this moment so high is its connection to what happens afterwards. Only one scene later, we see Leo get tossed through the window of April's apartment. Due to his injuries, Leo ends up being in a coma for 3 months, and the trauma that he endures during this moment sticks with him throughout the first half of Season 3. Being yet another turning point in the series, it simply can't be forgotten. Moving on to the Shredder and Splinter sewer fight. Entering our top 5, we have yet another moment from the Season 2 finale. Although shorter than the Leo and Shredder fight, we felt it carried even more weight in that moment. After fighting with Shredder for several minutes, both he and Shredder end up falling into a pit. When April receives visions of their fight, the group travels through the sewers and eventually finds them. Because they're trapped behind bars, the Turtles and April can only watch as the fight goes on. Although Splinter is able to send his enemy through a wall, Shredder eventually strikes him down before throwing him into a septic tank, seemingly killing him. If there was one word to describe this moment, it would definitely have to be emotional. All of the characters' reactions, especially Roth's, emphasize just how dramatic and devastating it is.
You monster!
Shredder's brutality is also on full display in this scene, further adding to its gruesomeness. Finally, it should be remembered that this was the first time that Splinter died in the show, and while he would survive the attack, the Turtles were left in the dark about this for several weeks, believing that their master was truly gone. Although this would be far from the last time that the Turtles and the audience would be forced to watch Shredder take the Splinter away from them, it was still a memorable and absolutely heartbreaking moment. Coming in at 4th place, we have Jay slays the Turtles. It may be considered cheating or cheap to put what is essentially a death fake-out this high up, but come on, this scene absolutely deserves it. When the Turtles are brought up to Usagi's world, they take it upon themselves to help Usagi complete his mission and defeat the evil wolf warrior Jay. When they all settle in for the night, Jay makes an appearance and the Turtles prepare for a fight. However, it quickly becomes obvious that this is no ordinary fight after Mikey charges in and gets stabbed by Jay's spear. Raph and Donnie don't fare much better, and when Leo is thrown over the cliffside, he's surrounded by the dead bodies of his younger brothers. As rain starts to fall and Leo starts to cry, Jay continues to taunt him, leading into another fierce battle. Soon enough, after it looks like Leo's about to die as well, it's revealed to all be a nightmare created by Jay, and everyone's just fine. Now, if someone were to call this scene a time killer, given that it has no real impact on the rest of the plot, yeah, that's fair. And it's essentially why we're unable to put it any higher, despite all of the so-called death. Still, whether or not it was fake, the devastation that the characters feel and how realistic the scene feels in the moment causes it to stick with viewers. After all, how often do we see the Turtles actually lose a fight, let alone get stabbed and left for dead? We understand that this ranking may be a bit controversial, but to be fair, a gruesome nightmare is still gruesome. The bronze medal of gruesome goes to the mutation of Timothy. Here we are, the most gruesome mutation scene from TMNT 2012. And as far as we're concerned, it never gets any easier to watch. All Timothy wanted was to be a mutant hero like the Turtles, and when he finally got the opportunity to be mutated in the episode The Pulverizer Returns, it took a turn for the worse.
I'm gonna be a mutant like you!
Unlike many of the other mutations in the show, where people simply become monstrous or more animalistic, Timothy's mutation resulted in him becoming just a mass of ooze and organs. While certainly disturbing to look at, hearing Timothy confused and in pain during it just made the moment even worse. It even got to the point where Timothy couldn't even speak anymore, just yelling as his voice became more and more distorted. Not even the Turtles could help him at that point, with the only option being to gather him up in an empty mutagen container. While the moment itself is practically the definition of gruesome, it doesn't end up holding much weight in the series, given that Timothy, now Mutagen Man, only makes one other appearance before being frozen and forgotten. Though that does add to the tragedy of Timothy's story, it also prevents it from taking our top spot. The silver medal of gruesome goes to the death of Splinter, for reals this time. For some watching at the time, this moment was a long time coming. No man, nor rat, can escape death for very long, and it was becoming obvious that Splinter's time was coming to a close. After defeating Karai, Team Hamato splits up to try and take out Super Shredder and his henchmen. Splinter and his group soon find Super Shredder on the roof of the Wolf Hotel and begin to battle him. Eventually, only Splinter is left standing to fight him, and it is brutal. The Super Shredder holds no punches, and while Splinter is able to sever many of the Super Shredder's claws and even knock him off the roof at one point, this victory doesn't last long. April screams at Splinter to watch out, but he's unable to get out of the way as Super Shredder stabs him and throws him off the roof.
No more will you haunt me, rat.
Because this part is done in slow motion, we're able to take in all the horror all the characters are feeling at the moment. Although April is able to defeat Shredder thanks to an anger-fueled attack, the main focus of the scene is really Splinter's death. Now, we're sure many of you are wondering why this moment isn't being ranked number 1. Well, it all comes down to context. Out of context, this moment is pretty gruesome and even hard to watch at times. But in context, you can't help but get that element of been there, done that. Although the situation is much different than the one in the Season 3 finale, there are similar enough elements. Simply put, we've seen Splinter die before, and Shredder even kills him the exact same way he did the first time. The episode even hints throughout it that, yep, Splinter's gonna die, sort of ruining both the surprise and even the impact a little bit. Although this scene ends up holding more weight due to the fact that Splinter's death actually sticks this time, we still felt that we couldn't give it the top spot, and that there was still one more moment that beat it in terms of gruesomeness. The gold medal of gruesome goes to April Kills Donnie. Although many of the moments on this list could maybe be debated in terms of their ranking, this moment is, without a doubt, the most gruesome moment in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012. It is honestly mind-blowing that this moment was shown on Saturday morning alongside reruns of SpongeBob SquarePants. This moment comes after April has fully been taken over by Zenaron and has gone more than a little power crazy. Naturally, the Turtles and Casey go after her, with Donnie doing all he can to try and bring her back to reality. He climbs the Channel 6 building and tries to talk her down, and April in turn destroys him, like literally disintegrates him with her powers, turning him into just a bunch of atoms. There are even a couple of split seconds where we see Donnie's muscles, organ, and skeleton before he bursts into a million pieces. Yikes. This is the main reason why it ranks not only at the top of our list, but also ranks so high above the Mikey disintegration scene from When Worlds Collide. It's just so much more of a spectacle, and as such, feels all the more painful and gruesome when you watch it. Add in the fact that this is technically April of all people doing this, and you've got plenty of emotional pain that you can throw in too. There are only two things that could possibly bring this moment down. The first being that, of course, Donnie is brought back together in the end. Secondly, this moment is never really followed up on outside of this episode. April literally killed Donnie, and the two never talk about it, nor does the Hamato family even have a falling out with her over it. It's just weird, and kind of lazy if we're being honest. Still, the horror-esque presentation and the initial impact of the scene is more than enough to rank it above the rest.
When it comes to the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, one of the biggest discussion points is its portrayal of various relationships. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is TMNT 2012 Relationships, Healthy to Toxic. As always, we're going to be starting with the least toxic relationships. These relationships are the healthy. The gold medal of healthiness goes to Mikey and Leatherhead. When the Turtles first came across this scaly titan, Mikey was the only one to see him as more than just an out-of-control beast. When Leatherhead came to, it was Mikey who showed him patience, kindness, and a few helpings of pizza soup.
We brought you here so you could get better.
Even when the rest of his brothers lacked trust in Leatherhead, Mikey still believed in him. This loyalty between them was shown again in Season 2, when they protected each other in Dimension X. They've never had a bad interaction with each other, and almost always greet each other with a hug. Really, there's so much genuine love and friendship that we really couldn't think of any relationship more deserving of the spot. The silver medal of healthiness goes to gal pals Karai and Shinigami. Although Shini wasn't introduced until Season 4, it was made evident just how close she was to her senpai, Karai. They share a strong bond, working together excellently and always being there for each other, both in and outside of battle.
You're the silly one. I like you.
They listen to each other, even when having different opinions, like Shinny wanting to spend money that she, Karai, and Leo stole from the Shredder instead of just torching it, and their protectiveness of each other is made clear whenever one of them is hurt. Despite Karai technically being Shinny's superior in the Foot Clan, given that she is its new head, there never feels like there is a power dynamic, allowing them to rank high on our list. Moving on to the bronze medal of healthiness, we have Raph and Mona Lisa. Fans may be surprised to see them this high, given that Mona briefly betrayed Raph not too long after meeting him. However, this really was just a moment of weakness on Mona's part, only brought on because she wanted to protect her people, and it's safe to say that she was able to make up for it by the end of that episode. Beyond that, they are cute. They admire each other's strength and are always willing to fight for each other. Not even going long distance can do much to negatively affect their relationship, and each time they do meet up, their love is stronger than ever. Even if we had to dock this pairing a couple of points for Mona's betrayal, we can't say that there's any real hidden malice or red flags to be found. easily making them the healthiest romance in TMNT 2012. Next is the show's so-called B team, Donnie and Mikey. Having less friction between them than Raph and Leo often have, they have a pretty healthy relationship despite their occasional bickering.
Well, that plan didn't work.
Even when they get on each other's nerves, they stick together and work together pretty well. Donnie is also usually the most patient with Mikey, being less likely to smack or insult him. However, he does these things occasionally, which isn't great. Mikey, meanwhile, can sometimes disregard Donnie's personal boundaries by messing around in his brother's lab, which we don't approve of. But even with these flaws, they have the strongest bond out of the four turtles. Next, we have Raph and Casey Jones. Needless to say, they didn't start off on the right foot, with their first meeting coming about while both of their tempers were high. Naturally, this led to a brutal fight. Once they got to know each other, they began to bond over their love of fighting, and ever since then, they've been best friends. Their relationship isn't without its flaws. On Raph's side of things, he can underestimate or dismiss Casey due to him not being a ninja like everyone else on their team. Really, Raph doesn't want his buddy to get hurt or do something stupid without having backup. Overall, it's easy to see why they managed to get along so well. Following them, we have Leo and Mikey. With Leo being the oldest turtle and Mikey being the youngest, it's easy for Leo to fall into an almost parental role when it comes to his orange brother. This is seen in the way Leo patches up Mikey when he gets hurt or how protective he is. While they may not hang out all the time due to their clashing personalities and mindsets, Leo still has a soft spot for his youngest brother. Mikey, in turn, also cares a lot about his oldest bro. This was best seen in just how concerned he got when he thought that Leo had been crying. It's a shame that we didn't see them bond more, but hey, that's what Rise of the TMNT is for, we suppose. What brings this relationship down a bit, however, is how Leo can sometimes be dismissive of Mikey due to how he sees his youngest brother, like we see in the very first episode. Thankfully, this improves, so we can't take too many points away from this relationship. Next, we have Raph and Spike, aka Slash. Starting off as owner and pet, Spike served as Raph's confidant. Raph, in turn, was incredibly protective of him as well as affectionate. Unfortunately, when Spike was mutated into Slash, all the venting about his brothers ended up biting Raph in the shell, when Slash decided that his buddy was better off without the other turtles.
We'll be the ultimate ninja team.
When Raph confronted him about this, Slash showed that he was willing to beat up Raph if he refused to get out of his way. But even after they fought, Raph still showed concern for Slash and worried about him when he learned that Slash had formed a partnership with the Neutralizer, showing that he still considered Slash to be a friend, despite the betrayal. This love for his former pet paid off in the end, and they were able to remain friends and allies, as Slash took the time to improve himself and make up for his mistakes, eventually becoming the leader of the mighty Mutanimals. In a way, they're sort of like Mikey and Leatherhead, just with a bit more violence at the start. Finishing off the healthy, we have Bebop and Rocksteady. Back when they were humans, they were, at best, willing allies with a bit of not-so-great history. After their mutation, however, they ended up forming more of a partnership and even a friendship after a while. Although they would still be snarky, they worked together well, and even started living together at one point. Where their friendship truly got a chance to shine was in the three-part series finale with the 1987 Turtles, where their great teamwork was essentially what both nearly doomed and saved the world. Rocksteady even offered Bebop a hug when the latter was feeling unsure of the 87 Shredder's plan.
You want hug?
They may have been villains for most of this Incarnation's run, but they were still one of the show's best bromances. Next, we're gonna list some of the relationships that fall more in the in-between, where we don't think they're completely bad but still feel like they can use some work. Welcome to the gray area. Starting off this section, we have April and Casey Jones. It's the first half of the Casey-April-Donnie love triangle, and it definitely feels like the healthiest, even if there are still plenty of flaws. With Casey being unwilling to hide his crush, it was easy for him to get on April's nerves, especially when all she wanted to do was focus on his tutoring. Thankfully, as they spent more time together, they formed a genuine bond. Casey proved to be a decent listener and protective, helping April fight off whatever enemies came after her without hesitation. April, in turn, grew to care about Casey and was happy to hang out with him outside of tutoring and missions. Really, it's only the occasional unwanted flirting and gawking on Casey's part that brings them down into the gray area. Otherwise, they would have been higher. Next are the teams Brains and Brawn, Donnie and Raph. Given that they're opposites, the friction between them isn't too surprising, whether that's Raph getting annoyed at Donnie's scientific explanations or Donnie getting aggravated at Raph's brashness. Still, on Raph's side of things, he can actually be a pretty decent big brother for Donnie when he wants to be. This mostly comes out when he's trying to be Donnie's wingman whenever Don tries to impress April. He's also been shown to compliment some of Donnie's inventions. Donnie doesn't always share this courtesy. In many instances, when Donnie is given a free pass to do so, he can be harsh, insulting, and mean to Raph.
No one appreciates me.
We can't forget the moment in the first act of the Season 4 episode, Mutant Gangland, and that was hardly the first time Don crossed the line when it came to Raph. Next is one of the most famous TMNT relationships, Leo and Raph. Simply put, they take brotherly rivalry to a whole new level. They argue at least several times a season, with both being extremely sensitive about who's right and who's wrong. Their rivalry in the dojo doesn't really help, and a lack of proper communication often means that they have a lot of misunderstandings. But for all the fighting and arguing, there is a hidden softness between them that is occasionally shown. Whenever Leo is struggling, Raph is there to help pick him up. Whether it's using a quote from Space Heroes to inspire Leo, or helping him regain his strength after Leo wakes up from his coma. Leo, meanwhile, never lets any bitterness or anger he has towards Raph get in the way of protecting him or working with him. Even when they're at each other's throats while on the planet Zavadal, Leo broke through the planet's influence and told Raph that he loved him, ending their fight before it can lead to any major injuries.
Raph, I love you, bro.
While there's a lot that can be improved, it's the moments of genuine brotherly love that earn this relationship a couple of extra points. Next, we have Splinter and his sons. Families can be tricky, and for as much as we know, Splinter loves his sons. His sternness with them can sometimes be off-putting, given that he can sometimes act more like a sensei than a father, especially when it comes to handing out punishments. Splinter will step up and fight for his family when necessary, even at the risk of his own life. As for the boys, they love their father and respect him greatly, only occasionally disobeying him. What brings this relationship down so low is the blatant favoritism that Splinter can sometimes show.
It's Leonardo.
While he'll give all of his sons advice, he really only spends one-on-one time with Leo, teaching his special techniques like the healing hands and putting a huge amount of pressure on him to be a good leader, and after his death, a good sensei. When it comes to the other turtles, we don't see him have much of a bond with them outside of that initial student-teacher relationship. He didn't even say goodbye to his other kids after he died, and in Splinter's last appearance, we only see him have an emotional moment with Leo and Karai, only hugging the latter. He doesn't even comment on Mikey saving the day in that episode, nor does he give Mikey or any of his other sons a hug before heading back to the spirit realm. While we can't call Splinter a bad father, he comes off as distant and emotionally neglectful. Next is Raph and Mikey. Let's get this out of the way. There's a difference between brotherly roughhousing or teasing and being a bully, and Raph sometimes crosses that line because of his anger. Of all the brothers, Raph can be the most harsh towards Mikey, with there even being times where he insults him for no reason. But to be fair, Mikey isn't entirely innocent. While yeah, there are plenty of times where Raph's behavior is unwarranted, there are also plenty of times where Mikey will actively tease or goad Raph into a reaction, very much acting like a little brother, and we can't exactly say that we approve of Mikey's actions either. But despite all the bickering and harshness that can sometimes be found with them, they also love each other without question. Raph is protective of Mikey and has comforted him, like when Mikey was betrayed by Bradford.
Thanks, Raph. Anytime.
Mikey in turn comforted Raph in the Season 2 finale after Splinter was defeated by Shredder, calming his brother's rage almost instantly with a hug. This was one of the more heartwarming moments in the series. Much like Leo and Raph, we feel that Raph and Mikey have plenty of room for improvement, even if there's plenty of love there as well. Finishing the four brothers, we have Leo and Donnie. They've had a lot of clashes. They argued over strategies in the Season 2 finale, showing how differing their mindsets can be.
If I were leader, But you're not leader, Donnie. I am.
Their next clash comes when Leo tells Donnie that he's not working hard enough on the Retro Mutagen, which Donnie naturally sees as both unfair and infuriating. Finally, when Donnie wants to take revenge on Don Vizioso for nearly killing him, Leo doesn't take the time to talk about Donnie's feelings and instead tries to use his older brother authority to force Donnie out of his revenge mindset, which leads to Donnie getting angrier. What hurts their ranking is their relationship outside of their fights. Leo and Don don't really hang out, out or have very many positive interactions like we see with some of the other brother relationships. For these reasons, we had to place them on the lower half of our list. Next, we have Donnie and April. Certainly one of the more awkward relationships in the 2012 series. The moment that Donnie first saw April, he fell for her hard and made this fact pretty clear. While they were able to develop a genuine relationship, we still had to cringe at some of Donnie's more possessive moments. From spying on her and Casey to calling her things like my April and my sweet chinchilla. That last one is just, come on man, that's weird. But to Donnie's credit, he tries to let his crush on April go when he starts to think that she's not interested, only for April to make things much more complicated by kissing him on the lips when he tells her this. Now, some fans have argued that, similar to Aang and Katara from Avatar: The Last Airbender, April might have liked Donnie back, but just didn't want to pursue an actual relationship because they were in the middle of a war with the Krang and the Shredder. And hey, that's totally understandable. We just feel that April could have done a better job communicating this by using her words instead of simply confusing Donnie even more with a kiss. Overall, while they may be good friends, any potential romance between them has been shown to be incredibly messy. Finishing up the love triangle, we have Donnie and Casey Jones. It's a tale as old as time. Two guys after the same girl. This, combined with a sort of jock versus nerd rivalry, led to a ton of fighting between them, complete with insults and constant one-ups. It's this rough start to their relationship that puts them so low on our list. Thankfully, things do take a more positive turn as the series goes on. We see Donnie start to respect Casey being loyal and good in a fight, while Casey in turn is willing to acknowledge Donnie's intelligence and tech savviness. They even rebuild a car together while at the farmhouse and protect each other against the speed demon. If anything, seeing this brief moment of bonding makes it more aggravating when they stop hanging out. But hey, at least they eventually stopped fighting over April. Ending the gray area, we have Leo and Karai. Even if we ignore the somewhat gross fact that they qualify as half-siblings, making the more flirty moments between them more they still have their ups and downs. Because they both have their own moral code and don't like to be told what to do, they often debate and clash with each other. Karai may have helped save Leo and the other turtles from time to time, but she wasn't afraid to be manipulative or to briefly betray them for her own needs.
I trusted you!
I know!
Leo, meanwhile, just kept coming back, always trusting that Karai would make the right choices in the end, even when everything else about her said otherwise. We can respect Leo's loyalty to Karai and his belief in her having a good heart deep down, but given that this loyalty sometimes led him into making some dumb decisions, it's hard to see it as completely positive. Still, there's just enough good here to allow these two to stay out of the toxic tier. Just stay platonic. We have reached the relationships that have a long way to go, as well as the ones that maybe never should have been formed in the first place. These are the toxic relationships. Just outside the toxic podium, we have Bradford and Baxter Stockman. We wanted to isolate this relationship because out of all the henchmen that Shredder has, Bradford seems to have the most contempt towards Stockman, getting a kick out of threatening and insulting him, despite Stockman not doing much to warrant this. We may not have much sympathy for Stockman, but even he doesn't deserve all that. The bronze medal of toxicity goes to Shredder and Tiger Claw. While they may have the closest relationship when it comes to Shredder and his henchmen, all the loyalty and respect on Tiger Claw's side doesn't amount to much. Although Shredder is willing to compliment Tiger Claw on his effectiveness as a bounty hunter, he refuses to listen when Tiger Claw asks him to stop corrupting himself with Mutagen, despite Tiger Claw clearly being concerned for his master's health and well-being. Additionally, Tiger Claw put the entire world at risk just so he can try and bring his master back to life using the power of Cavaxis. On the one hand, that level of loyalty is admirable in a way, but it also comes off as unhealthy. So yeah, maybe Tiger Claw is better off without Shredder. Easily getting the silver medal of toxicity are Splinter and Shredder. Even after growing up as brothers, it was ultimately jealousy that made any bond they might have had totally beyond repair. Once he learned of his origins, Oroku Saki no longer had any respect for Yoshi, going so far as to try to kill his brother just so he can have both the Hamato Dojo and Tang Shen. What's more, Saki would continuously blame Yoshi for everything wrong in his life, never taking the blame for anything, not even things that never blatantly his fault, like Shin's death or Karaya's mutation. In response, Yoshi would try many times to break through Saki's madness, even being willing to work with him during the Triceratons invasion, which what ultimately killed Splinter the first time. Not even the fate of the world was enough to quell Shredder's desires for revenge. And considering all the damage that Shredder managed to do after this point, we feel that Splinter is partially at fault for not just taking him out when he had the chance. It's safe to say that there isn't really much brotherly love left between them, but the only thing more toxic than a brotherly rivalry is a love built on nothing but lies and manipulation. The gold medal of toxicity goes to the father-daughter relationship between Shredder and Karai. Although the love he had for his so-called daughter was genuine at times, Shredder's love was never enough for him to put his mission of revenge aside, and really only saw Karai as part of that revenge. When Karai started learning the truth about her actual father, Shredder refused to let her go, resorting to holding her captive and even brainwashing her, before finally doing what he could to erase any feelings of love he had left for her, making it easier for him to kill Karai. Because apparently, if he couldn't have her loyalty, then no one could. It's arguably a more tragic relationship than Shredder and Splinter's, given that Karai did seem to love her fake father as a child, showing that even if their relationship was built on lies, there had still been some happy moments between them. But none of those implied moments could hold a candle to what the relationship ultimately became, turning into the most toxic relationship of TMNT 2012.
The 2012 version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is pretty well known for both its characters as well as its frequent action scenes. This is TMNT 2012, Weak Too Powerful. The weakest character by far, unfortunately, has to be Mondo Gecko. Before getting mutated, Mondo was just an ordinary teenage boy, being even younger than the Turtles. Unfortunately, not even becoming a mutant could do much in terms of strength or ability. He can, however, use his tail as an extra appendage and climb up walls. He's also a decent skateboarder. However, he isn't very physically strong, nor does he have any formal combat training.
I just need a minute to catch my breath.
As such, he's often relying on others whenever he's in a battle. Mondo can also be pretty naive due to his age. All of these factors combined easily makes him the weakest character in TMNT 2012. For our next weakest, we have the always unlucky Baxter Stockman. Although he was pretty brilliant in his own right, Stockman still wasn't necessarily the brightest. Anytime he tried to give himself an advantage through an invention or machine, it really wouldn't take too long for the Turtles to find a way around it and defeat him. Without armor or robotic mousers to back him up, Stockman is a pretty scrawny and ultimately harmless fighter, more likely to run away than actually fight. As for his mutation, we will acknowledge that along with gaining the ability to fly, Stockman gets a decent strength boost too, being strong enough to actually lift the Turtles off the ground. But of course, strength still can't make up for a lack of combat prowess, so Stockman still lands near the bottom of our list. Up next is the cheeky witch, Shinigami. Shinny made quite a name for herself when she was able to defeat April, who had just become an unofficial kunoichi. While not too strong physically, she still knows how to fight and can be pretty clever as well. Along with her magical illusions and spells, Shinny also uses a kusarigama as well as the hypnostones. Unfortunately, the latter really isn't too impressive as it only worked on Tiger Claw for a few seconds. Additionally, April is the only notable person that Shinigami has ever beaten in a one-on-one on-screen fight, and thus doesn't have too many personal wins under her belt in comparison to many of the other characters.
My sensei doesn't need a turtle weapon. Your piston will do just fine.
Still, her skills in ninjutsu and as a witch allow her to rank above Mondo and Stockman. From witchcraft to vigilantism, we're ranking Casey Jones next. As much of an asset as Casey can be to the Hamato clan, there really is no denying that out of all of them, Casey is the weakest. That's not to say he isn't still strong. The kid definitely knows how to throw down, and has more than enough weapons to fill an armory. From bats and hockey sticks to exploding pucks and a homemade taser. Casey is also physically fit, able to keep up with most fighters even when they outmatch him in both size and skill. This was proven when he was able to hold his own against Raph, a skilled ninja, and when he was able to eventually win a fight against Hun. He also once knocked out one of the Rat King's giant rats with just his bare fist. Unfortunately, when compared to the rest of the Hamato clan, as well as many of the series' mutant baddies, Casey just isn't able to compete on his own as an ordinary human. But hey, as far as humans go, he's still pretty tough.
Actually, crime fighting's pretty boring.
Next is another tragic character, Mutagen Man. As Timothy, he had very little combat potential. He was uncoordinated, clumsy, and weak, although we'll give him points for determination.
I'm gonna be a mutant like you!
While his mutation into Mutagen Man helped with his strength and durability, making him strong enough to go on a destructive rampage, his mental instability means that he can't really strategize and can be easily tricked, as Donatello demonstrates. Honestly, if it weren't for the strength boost and his limb-generating abilities, Mutagen Man would be even lower down on this list. Still, we felt that his physical abilities were enough to rank him above Casey, given that the Turtles were only able to defeat him by freezing him. Next up is the alligator-turned-mighty mute animal, Leatherhead. Having survived being experimented on by the Krang, Leatherhead showed both physical and spiritual strength from the beginning. One of his biggest victories came when he was able to subdue Trug, a large rock alien from Dimension X, long enough for the Turtles to escape. He was also strong enough to briefly go toe-to-toe with Shredder, despite being outmatched in terms of skill and technique. As an alligator, he also has a tough armored hide and is extremely resistant to attacks even from Krang laser blasts. Although his rage moments caused him issues in the beginning, he was able to overcome this flaw through Michelangelo's help. His final win came when he was the one to finish off Razar, using his abilities in the water to his advantage. Simply put, Leatherhead is one of the Hamato clan's strongest allies based on pure physical ability alone. And while being in Dimension X might have aged him, you'd hardly know it by looking at how many wins this guy has had. Just above Leatherhead is his teammate Slash. Armed with a mace and a whole lot of strength, Slash is one of the physically strongest mutants in the show, right up there with Leatherhead and the Super Shredder. In his first appearance, he was able to fight and outmatch all 4 of the Turtles with ease, only being defeated when Raph hit one of his pressure points. This shows that while he can be brought down, it can likely only be done through skill and strategy. This is seen again through his losses in the second half of the series, namely against the Hammer and the Super Shredder. Simply put, physical power just isn't enough when you're up against mutants who are just as strong, if not stronger. We will hand it to Slash that he is extremely durable, and as the leader of the Mutanimals, he does know a bit about strategizing.
We may need to lose some dead weight.
Still, given that he wasn't traditionally trained like many of the other characters were, we just couldn't put him any higher. Up next, we have one of the oldest villains of the series, Zever, aka Fish Face. Let's get this out of the way first. Being a mutant fish has a pretty big disadvantage. Zever is unable to survive without water, and that dangerous weakness can be easily taken advantage of. He also requires robot legs to walk and properly fight. But even with these notable weaknesses, Zever has a lot going for him. Mainly, his fish biology has granted him a deadly venom that once nearly killed Raph, as well as enhanced strength and enhanced speed while in the water. In terms of weapons, Zever typically uses butterfly knives and a Bali sword. He's also one of the more intelligent villains in the show and knows capoeira, a Brazilian martial art form. Honestly, even when taking into account how easy it would be to incapacitate and suffocate him, he still manages to be one of the Turtles' most deadliest foes. Falling surprisingly low on our list is the Turtle Sensei, Splinter. Now, before you all get up in arms about this ranking, we do have our reasons. As a ninjutsu master, Splinter has plenty of skills and expertise. He's skilled in several different weapons and martial arts forms, has enhanced senses as a rat, and can even fight while drunk, as seen in Tale of Tiger Claw. Splinter can also be pretty durable, in that he was able to survive a huge 1,000-foot drop after his first battle with the Super Shredder, coming out of it with only a broken leg. We also see throughout the show that he's able to fight off opponents like Foot Ninjas, Fish Face, and Dog Pound. Unfortunately, Splinter is an older character, one who has lost fights and even nearly died a couple of times at the hand of Shredder, someone he struggled to beat even as a human. Speaking of which, it's rare for Splinter to even fight outside of the dojo, and when he does, half the time it doesn't end well for him.
Perhaps I do need to get out of the sewers for a time.
Taking his age, average size, and lack of any super mutant abilities into account, we just had to put him here. Finishing off the Mutanimals in this list, we have Dr. Rockwell next. Again, this choice may be a bit controversial, but it really all comes down to their abilities. No, Dr. Rockwell may not be too strong physically, but his mutant abilities are what push him up this high. He possesses a psychic ability to read minds and sense a person's intentions, giving him a distinct advantage in evasion and combat. Rockwell's psychic abilities also extend to him being able to move, control, and manipulate objects with his mind and generate telekinetic blasts from his head. Rockwell is also able to reach out to allies telepathically, which is also a huge advantage. Additionally, while he's far from being the strongest, being an ape allows him to be incredibly strong, fast, and agile, which means he has something to rely on if an opponent is able to counter his psychic abilities. Had Rockwell been more interested in training and fighting than science, he might have been ranked even higher. Following him is the always groovy thief, Bebop. As a human and a skilled thief, Bebop tended to fight smarter instead of harder, as we saw when he was able to take out all of Shredder's guards on his own. He uses a cloaking suit to gain the upper hand over enemies, as well as an energy mohawk and a variety of bombs as his defenses. He is also pretty agile, using his dancing as a way to dodge and fight. He also gained a heightened sense of smell after mutating into a warthog. Though he's much more intelligent and skilled than his 1987 counterpart, even being able to defeat the 87 turtles with relative ease, Bebop's lack of physical strength and his reliance on his tech and his cloaking, both of which can be fallible, stops him from going any higher. We've finally come to our first Ninja Turtle, Donatello. Yeah, apologies to all the Donnie fans out there, but we ultimately had to name him as the weakest of the 4 turtles. Despite being book smart, it's been shown throughout the series that he sometimes doesn't understand and or has a hard time grasping the lectures of Master Splinter. He can sometimes overthink or over-strategize, causing him to lose a fight. We should also take into account that, next to Mikey, he likely spends the least amount of time in training, given that he'd rather work in his lab. That being said, Donnie is still an extremely skilled ninja at the end of the day. He's a master with his bow, which can also turn into a naginata for more deadly attacks, and it's often Donnie's brain that allows him to find solutions in a fight.
Hey, I'm smarter than all you guys put together. It should be me.
This was seen when he was able to figure out how to defeat Timothy. Him being a mutant also makes him stronger, faster, and more durable than a human. As such, we felt we couldn't put him any lower, even if he is slightly weaker than his brothers. Next on our list is the Kunoichi extraordinaire, Karai. Yet another human who is eventually mutated, Karai managed to be formidable in both of her forms. Being trained by the Shredder himself, Karai is in peak physical condition and is an expert in several different martial arts and ninjutsu fields. Through her snake transformation, she not only gains fangs, but also deadly venom spit and secretion, night vision, and a speed boost both in and out of the water. We should also mention that her skin shedding ability allows her to heal from burns, and she is even able to briefly hypnotize her opponents. Unfortunately, Karai sometimes doesn't get the chance to show off her skills. She ends up getting captured and brainwashed several times throughout the show, showing that it's pretty easy for people to overpower her. Karai can also be arrogant and headstrong at times, which can also lead to her defeats. Even with all of her strength and abilities, she wasn't able to defeat her father in his super form. Granted, not too many people can defeat the Super Shredder, but this defeat, combined with all of her others, keeps her in this spot. Switching back over to the villains, we have Bradford aka Razar next. Being one of Shredder's top henchmen, it's pretty easy to see why. Even as a human, this guy was pretty strong and skilled, being a martial artist master, a ninjutsu master, and a master swordsman. Then, after mutating twice, Bradford ended up developing enhanced strength, durability, speed, agility, and a heightened sense of hearing, seeing, and smell due to being mutated with a canine. He also has bone spikes as well as claws and fangs that he can use as weapons. Additionally, despite looking extremely monstrous, Bradford is still mentally capable and is able to both strategize and lead Foot Clan soldiers. But while Bradford may not have any major physical weaknesses, it's often his cockiness or anger that'll get the better of him, leading him to being outmatched by the Turtles. He also wasn't strong enough to break out of Leatherhead's grasp and ended up drowning at the end of the show's 4th season. Though he was resurrected, he ended up just falling into the Netherworld shortly after. Given that he's the only major henchman to die, we felt that we couldn't quite rank him any higher. Up next, we have the Turtle in Red, Raphael. Although he may be the one who's always ready for a fight, we can't quite call him the most powerful. That being said, Raph is extremely strong. He's certainly durable, able to take a pummeling from Slash and still get back up. His most notable ability is his brute strength, which is only increased by his anger, although this anger can also sometimes distract him.
He was the angriest, nastiest guy you ever met. Except for you.
Still, this ability has occasionally allowed him to briefly get the better of more skilled characters like Leo and the Super Shredder. So yeah, Raph is definitely the physically strongest turtle, but not necessarily the most powerful. Compared to the other two turtles, it's his skill as well as, again, his anger that stops him from being ranked above them. Ranked just a bit above his older brother is Michelangelo. It's said that of all the turtles, Mikey has the most potential, and he certainly proves that. Even as early as Season 1. Remember when he was able to take down Bradford using his own kata, a move that Mikey had only just learned? Splinter has also stated before that Mikey is able to move and act without thinking, and that he, along with Leo, have the highest intuition out of all his brothers. This isn't even taking into account Mikey's weapons, Nunchaku and Kusarigama, which are not only versatile, but also grant him a long-range attack. Mikey is also the most agile of his brothers, as well as the most unpredictable, and is implied to have the most raw talent. Finally, we just have to bring up Mikey's savage side. Mikey was both strong and skilled enough to survive for months in Dimension X, something his brothers struggled to do. All of these things are enough to earn him the title of the second most powerful turtle. Managing to play several spots above his partner is Rocksteady. Next to Casey and one other character who we'll get to in a moment, Rocksteady is probably the character with the biggest variety in weapons. No surprise there, given that he's a weapon expert and an arms dealer. His weapons include knuckle dusters, a hammer and sickle, scattergun, flamethrower, rocket launcher, and his own horn. Speaking of his mutation, Rocksteady becomes extremely strong and durable once he becomes a rhino. But even with a huge size boost, Rocksteady manages to be pretty fast on his feet too. It's insanely easy for him to knock out opponents, and at one point even managed to break Casey's ribs in what was a pretty brutal scene. He's also great at hand-to-hand combat and is an excellent marksman. It's hard to find any true weakness with this guy outside of him occasionally being tricked by others. Ultimately, what stops him from going any higher isn't anything of Rocksteady's, but just the fact that our last few characters really are that powerful. Finishing off the henchmen, we naturally have the assassin Tiger Claw. Tigers are already strong physically, but Tiger Claw has managed to hone that strength through traditional martial arts training. Tiger Claw was even durable enough to fight his way out of a giant worm's stomach and even defeat a Krang army single-handed.
And you believe such a thing could contain my hate?
He's also incredibly acrobatic, has enhanced smell and hearing, and given that he has sharp claws and fangs, he's never defenseless. Of course, he's got plenty of other weapons too. His main weapons are his giant sword and his guns that can fire nets, freeze rays, and laser blasts. Finally, as an assassin, he can be incredibly skilled and strategic when he wants to be, and isn't afraid to fight dirty in order to defeat his target. With all this power, why are we only ranking him here? Well, again, it all comes down to training, and while Tiger Claw may have a ton of skills, others, such as Splinter and Leonardo, have managed to outwit him, while others like Shredder and April can overpower him. Because of this, Tiger Claw ends up falling just a bit short of our most powerful characters. Just outside the top 5, we're ranking the infamous Shredder. Oh boy, where do we start with this one? Being the big bad of the series, of course Shredder is gonna have a ton of strength and skill. Along with being a ninjutsu master, armed with a katana and razor-sharp blades, he's also a master tactician and manipulator, allowing him to lead his clan. As the Super Shredder, he gains superhuman strength, near invulnerability, and the ability to project steel and bone. While as Zombie Shredder, he gains telekinesis. He also ended up becoming immune to retro-mutagen. Of all the enemies in the show, Shredder was the hardest to defeat, as even when he did lose a fight, it was rare for him to be out of it for very long. Splinter was only able to truly defeat him once, during the invasion of the Triceratons, and once Shredder mutated, not even being crushed by a garbage truck could kill him.
I have molded myself into perfection. Ratman.
It ultimately takes Leo cutting off his head for him to finally die, and even then, it was a pretty close call. All in all, Shredder manages to mostly live up to his reputation of being practically unstoppable, but at the end of the day, he did ultimately lose, so we could only put him in our top 5. We've finally reached the leader of the Hamato clan, Leonardo. Naturally, as the turtle who trains the most, he would be the most skilled. He knows several techniques that his brothers don't, including how to heal himself and how to use pressure points. He's also the only one of his brothers to land a punch on Splinter, and this was during Season 1. Another great moment was when Leo was able to overcome the Fear Spores. Again, something the rest of his team couldn't do.
I face my fear every single day.
We can't forget how he was able to take on all of Shredder's henchmen all on his own at the end of Season 2. Sure, the fight still ended in a loss, but the fact that it even lasted that long is impressive. At the beginning of Season 3, Leo was actually skilled enough to fight Shredder to a standstill all on his own. Finally, although it was an extremely close fight, it was still Leo that managed to land the killing hit on Shredder in the end. Strategic, focused, and proficient in a variety of weapons, Leo easily earns the ranking of the most powerful turtle. When it came to choosing the strongest Hamato clan member, however, we just had to go with April O'Neil. Once seen as a bit of a damsel, April managed to rise through the ranks of her clan in a short amount of time, ultimately becoming its most powerful member. Starting with her more human side, April is a trained kunoichi, and while she isn't the same level as someone like Karai or Shinigami, April is still able to hold her own in a hand-to-hand fight. She was even able to use the Dragon's Tail move to immobilize Tiger Claw. Her weapons include a Tessin, a laser gun, and a Tanto blade, allowing her to fight both at close range and long range. Through her abilities that came from being a Krang experiment, April also has a sixth sense, telepathy, and extremely powerful telekinesis. The episode The Power Inside Her showed just how powerful she could be, having the ability to disintegrate someone with little to no effort on her part. Now yes, April's power boost in the 4th season was mostly due to the Aeon Crystal. However, the crystal could only bring out what was already there, and given that April could put Donnie back together without it, it stands to reason that with enough training and effort, April could one day be that powerful again all on her own. Keep in mind, April is still in her teens, so just imagine how powerful she becomes as an adult. We will acknowledge that the Turtles and the other traditionally trained fighters would still be able to outmatch her in a purely hand-to-hand fight, given that she only trained as a kunoichi for a year or so. But in terms of raw power, there are only a few other characters who can beat her. The Bronze Medal of Power is going to Lord Drag. Certainly one of the most annoying opponents that the Turtles have faced both during and after their space adventures, Drag is one ruler you don't want to mess with. Being an insect, he naturally has fangs that he can use in combat, as well as a small array of weapons such as webs, ropes, a chest rocket, and an electric blaster. Much like Stockman and Shredder, Drag also has a collection of robots that can do his bidding, and even if they're able to be defeated easily, numbers still account for something. And like a cockroach, Drag was one of those villains that just wouldn't stay dead. He was able to survive being decapitated and being stuck in space. It takes his ship being blown up for him to finally die, and honestly, this is the main reason why he ranks so high, though he still isn't our most powerful baddie. For our Silver Medal of Power, we're giving it to the demon Cavaxis. Coming from the 5th season of the show, Cavaxis is the lord of the Demo Dragons and is the ruler of the Netherworld. Naturally, a supernatural creature like him is gonna have some pretty impressive powers and abilities. Along with having the ability to fly and breathe fire, he also has super strength and the ability to absorb power and souls. Oh, and did we mention that he's immune to psychic attacks? He's also pretty invulnerable, able to take numerous attacks without breaking a sweat. Cavaxis is also a pretty great manipulator, as shown with how he was able to trick Tiger Claw. But with all of Cavaxis' strength, skill, and ability, there's still one thing keeping him from the top: the Seal of the Ancients. Cavaxis is forced to obey whoever holds the seal, being unable to harm them, and even if the seal is broken, Mikey showed that even sticking it back together with gum is enough to stop Cavaxis.
Impossible! The seal cannot be fixed!
It's a pretty huge weakness, and while it isn't enough to overshadow all of Cavaxis' strengths, it is enough to keep him from getting the gold. Finally, our Gold Medal of Power is going to none other than the wacky dimensional being Worm. Worm is one of the 3 reality-bending creators of chaos, only held back by his 5th dimensional prison. With his power, Worm is able to literally bend reality to his will. In other words, his power pretty much has no limits. He can do anything. It's said that he is the most powerful worm in 10 dimensions, and while he can only be freed by granting 3 wishes, he's shown to be pretty good at tricking people into setting him free.
You scared of a teeny tiny wish?
As such, we felt that this weakness wasn't as limiting as Cavaxis' weakness. While he's technically not a fighter, Worm's power is just on a whole nother level when compared to the rest of the series characters, and he easily earns the title of the most powerful.
Shortly after the 5th season of the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Nickelodeon announced a whole new series of turtle adventures, Rise of the TMNT. This series was highly stylized, action-packed, and completely unique. Although this series was cut short due to executive meddling, with the Netflix movie premiering in the summer of 2021 being its grand finale, Rise of the TMNT still has its fans who appreciate it for all the fun and fresh elements it brought to the franchise. including more new characters and new interpretations of old ones. We ranked the 2012 series, now let's rank the 2018 series to see which of these characters are the most pure and heroic and which are the most evil. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Rise of the TMNT. Good to evil. As always, we'll be starting with the characters who have the most honor and pure of heart, or who've done the most good to help save the day from mutant baddies. These are the good characters. Starting off this list, we have the matriarch of the Hamato clan, Karai. Although she wasn't in the series for long, we can't think of anyone more deserving of the title of most good. After losing her father to the Dark Armor, Karai started the Hamato clan to protect the world from her father and the Foot clan. She not only separated the Dark Armor, but sentenced herself to eternal imprisonment, ensuring that even if someone were to resemble the armor, the Shredder would not be at full power. As such, she's upset at her family when they free her 500 years later in the Season 2 finale. Karai doesn't let this cloud her feelings towards her family. In fact, she happily embraces her role as their new Gram, praising her grandchildren, including Splinter, for their differences and giving them affection, not minding that they aren't following tradition.
I'm pleased to meet my family.
She also encourages April, letting her know that even if her last name isn't Hamato, she's still one of them. When the Shredder attacks, Karai sacrifices herself to protect her family, but this doesn't stop her from being there for them. Through April, she's able to encourage Raph during his breakdown as she reminds him that he's not alone and is able to participate in the final battle. Karai is not only a fierce and noble warrior, but she's also a kind and loving grandmother and was willing to give everything she had to protect her family and the world.
Get away from my family.
For these reasons, we have to give Karai the Gold Medal of Good. In second place is a guy who literally uses niceness as his superpower, Todd. Fun fact, in nature, capybaras are some of the friendliest and most chill animals ever, able to peacefully interact with herbivores and predators alike. With that in mind, it's no wonder that a half-human, half-capybara mutant would be so darn nice. Living in the forest outside of New York, he's friends with tons of woodland critters, almost like a middle-aged Snow White.
He's the nicest guy in the world.
Todd's never thrown a punch, and when he has to fight, he uses dodging and turning his enemies' attacks against them. Todd also cares about the turtles. He considers them his best friends and is always there to help them, whether that's giving them new weapons in the finale, protecting them from an evil dentist, or taking a hit from meat sweats to protect Mikey. And to hammer home how good this guy is, he takes care of orphan puppies. That's just over the top. So why isn't he number one? Sometimes he uses his nice powers as a means of manipulation. He's also technically a member of the Evil League of Mutants. Even if he never attacked the turtles, he was still willing to hang out with them and give them some of his famous lemonade. Though this doesn't make him evil, it does make his friendliness more of a liability. Still, this is only a faint black mark on an otherwise perfect record of good. Taking the Bronze Medal of Good is the slime yokai Sunita. Like Karai, we only see Sunita a couple of times, but while she isn't a main character, her good actions still make enough of an impact that we feel she deserves some credit. At first, Sunita is cheerful, excited, and friendly towards April.
Hey, what's your number? We should hang out sometime.
Even when April acted strange or awkward, Sunita never looked down on her or made her feel worse. She was willing to reveal her secret in order to protect a disguised Donnie from the Foot Brute, who she knew was after her. Together with April, she was able to help save the day. In her second appearance, we see how trusting and encouraging Sunita can be. Though worried about her cloaking brooch, she never tries to make April feel guilty about her mistake, and once again fights alongside her. This slime girl seems like a great friend, and since she doesn't seem to have any negatives or dark side, we feel she earns a high ranking. Behind Sunita is her friend and honorary fifth turtle, April O'Neil. From the very beginning, April is bold and caring. She and Raph step forward and protect Mayhem, with April chasing after his kidnappers, willing to take action and put herself in danger if it means helping someone, especially if that someone is a friend. April goes above and beyond her employee duties when Alberto starts causing havoc, defending and protecting the kids. Through her friendship with Donnie, she's both loyal and willing to show tough love when necessary, like when Donnie's ego gets too big. She won't let Donnie walk all over her, but she still comforts him.
Play nice, D.
I really need the help.
As for not-so-great moments, April is occasionally blinded by the idea of normalcy. As a teenager with not too many human friends, she'll get frustrated when other teens see her as a weirdo, causing her to lash out, like when she refused to listen to Mayhem. These moments are few and far between. Most of the time, April loves her so-called weirdo life, just as much as she loves her turtle brothers. Being brave and caring, we couldn't think of a better BFF. Up next is Raphael, the leader of this incarnation of the TMNT. When you look at Raph's spiky and tough exterior, you may expect him to be more brutish or harsh towards his brothers, but Raph's just a huge softie and a gentle giant. As the big brother, both in age and in size, Raph can be protective and always willing to take the hardest hits so his family doesn't have to. He even leaps off a building to catch Leo when Leo gets tossed over the edge by Gruesome.
I have no idea what I just did, but anytime.
He frequently carries his family out of danger. He's always the first to charge an enemy and will patrol on his own to protect his city as the Red Angel of preventing harm. Like his 2012 counterpart, he can be a softie when it comes to animals like Mayhem, even if they don't always like him back. He wouldn't be a Raph without some anger issues. Though he almost never hits his brothers, he'll still lose his temper and snap at them when they start to drive him crazy. Due to him taking his role as big brother and leader seriously, he'll keep secrets from them, not listen to their ideas, or be too overprotective. Needless to say, Raph is a flawed leader. He's still, however, a great brother who cares about his family more than anything else in the world. Like his character description reads, he's a guy who has big muscles and an even bigger heart. Next is Master Splinter, aka Lujitsu, aka Hamato Yoshi. Yeah, it's kinda complicated. In fact, Splinter is a complicated guy in general, having positive and negative traits. After losing his mother at a young age, Yoshi rejected his destiny and instead became an action film star, choosing to believe that the legend of the Shredder wasn't real and instead wanting to have fun with his life. Ultimately, this backfired. Once he realized his mistake, Splinter took it upon himself to go undercover and go after the Foot, not wanting to put his sons at risk or force them to fight.
Not even lunch and I already saved the world.
It's only when he sees how strong they are and that they're already involved that he agrees to properly train and prepare them. Speaking of his sons, it should be mentioned that although he wasn't always the most attentive father, Splinter still saved his turtle sons from being child soldiers. While the trauma he endured in the Battle Nexus had a profound effect on his life, making him seem lazy or absent, the love he has for his family is always clear. Even when he doesn't make the best choices, like lying to Donnie about a demolition derby, taking the turtle tank for a joyride, or briefly trying to turn his sons into a more traditional Hamato clan, he still loves his family.
But I never lied about wanting to spend time with you.
Time and time again, he nearly sacrifices himself for them. He was even willing to give up the last piece of the Shredder armor if it meant his sons wouldn't be tortured. Though this might not have been the most selfish choice, considering that it put the rest of the world at risk, it still shows how good of a dad Splinter is. Following Splinter is a turtle that's most identical to him personality-wise, Leonardo. In contrast to his earlier versions, Leo is defined as a fast talker and a trickster who likes to tell bad jokes to cope with stressful situations. He's still observant and can come up with great plans, but with Raph being the leader this time around, he's more content with standing back and being more lax when it comes to things like training. Despite not being as diligent or as focused as other Leos, Rise's Leo is still very much on the good side. Like Raph, he cares about his family. In Origami Tsunami, Leo encouraged his brothers to keep going despite their failure. He protects Mikey in their adventure with the Gumbus and tries to be responsible when it's just him and Mikey helping out Senor Hueso. Granted, he still gets wrapped up in the competition, but at least he tried. He was the only one who refused to kick out Bullhop, even when everyone else was annoyed with him. And whenever Raph is in trouble or in harm's way, Leo will step up and take charge to help his big bro out. He was willing to sacrifice himself for his brothers when he thought that Piebald was going to flush them.
Flush me and let my family go.
Still, Leo has his faults, with his biggest one being his ego, and the cockiness he displays to cover up any insecurities come off as obnoxious or annoying. His refusal to tell the truth about Piebald wasn't a great moment, and as the team trickster, he can be sneaky. Thankfully, Leo is usually willing to swallow his pride and apologize, and although he still has a lot of growing to do, he's still a good kid with a good heart. The positive and feelings-focused Michelangelo is next. Mikey is the youngest of the fam, and you may think that he's more naive or innocent, but he's actually the most emotionally mature and empathetic of the turtles.
You're kind of a softie.
That really hurts my feelings.
He was able to help Donatello with his relationship with Sheldon by encouraging Donnie to be a better listener and less harsh, and he was the main catalyst in Draxum's redemption, willing to show him kindness and encouragement, even after everything Draxum had done to him. He's also a big softie, like when he refused to repossess Todd's RV and leave him and his puppies homeless. Though sometimes easy to scare, Mikey can still be brave and is always willing to fight alongside his brothers, even when he's frightened. Still being 13, Mikey can be selfish and a little chaotic. He let himself be driven by anger and was willing to abandon Todd in order to spend time with his favorite celebrity chef. His Dr. Delicate touch is built on brutal honesty, which can be both a good and a bad thing depending on the situation. Like the rest of his brothers, he can also be competitive and silly, which can get in the way of missions. But again, Mikey's still young, so these flaws aren't too concerning since you feel like he'll eventually grow out of them, and they don't take away from his other good qualities. Finally, we come to the final turtle, Donatello. Out of all his brothers, Donnie probably has the most morally questionable moments, as he's both stubborn and irresponsible. Although he likes to pretend he's an emotionless bad boy, he's often driven by his emotions as well as his ego. If he sees something that can be improved, he'll rely on science and his tech before he attempts to be honest and open. This has included altering his brother's brains to make them smarter when he was frustrated with their antics, making a drone that specifically favors him, and accidentally putting Witchtown in danger just to prove that science was better than magic.
Science, the bad boy of academic disciplines.
Some of his inventions have also been questionable, and even when he's in the wrong, it can take a lot for him to admit that he was wrong. While Donnie may lean more on the mad scientist side, he still has a soft side. For example, he takes time and effort to make his brothers gifts in the hopes of helping them. In the previously mentioned brain-altering incident, Donnie was willing to expose himself to his greatest fear, beach balls, and sacrifice a rare piece of tech just to get his brothers back to normal. He's also loyal to April and enjoys helping her out, even when he's sometimes overly eager about it. And he puts himself in danger at the drone races to protect Sheldon from getting hurt. Even if he's not the most moral turtle, he still has his heroic moments and is a good guy. Next is Frankenfoot, the origami foot soldier turned teammate. Originally, he was another origami soldier that the turtles fought at one point, but Raph, wanting a sparring partner, put him back together and turned this foe into a dopey but still protective friend. Even though he fights Raph for fun, he's still concerned whenever he accidentally hurts Raph. Later on, when the Foot captures the turtles, Frankenfoot turns his powers up a notch and protects his new buddies, blasting the Foot into the sky. We don't see much of Frankenfoot after this, with him only making small cameos. Even if he's not a frequently seen hero, he's still part of the family, and, like Raph said, he's their buddy.
Our buddy's the winner!
Another example from this show of a bad guy gone good. Rounding out the good list is Bullhop, the bull bellhop. Kind of self-explanatory. When the turtles first meet him, he was a persnickety bellhop who was just trying to do his job and keep the hotel clean. After being mutated, Bullhop was in a bad place and disliked the turtles. That is, until the turtles tried to cheer him up and apologize for his mutation by letting him stay in the lair.
You may not remember us.
Oh, I do!
As such, Bullhop quickly became a friend instead of a foe. Unfortunately, he also showed how much of a nuisance and poor house guest he is. But when he had the opportunity to prove himself and help his new friends, Bullhop immediately took it. Granted, he wasn't able to help much due to his clumsiness and his only real skills being related to dancing, but he still tried. Like Frankenfoot, we don't see him much after his titular episode, but even so, we feel like him being an ally and trying to help the turtles is enough to keep him in the good, if just barely. That does it for the good guys. We now enter neutral territory. These are the gray characters. Starting off the section, we have pizzeria owner Senor Hueso. Being the owner of a mutant pizza place can't be easy, and it's even harder when you have to deal with 4 certain turtles. From the moment they met the skeleton, it was clear that the turtles weren't on his good side, with Hueso having very little patience for their shenanigans, and even throwing them out at one point. When it was thought that his brothers were portal jacked, Hueso did very little at first to help Leo find them, even tricking him into getting beaten up.
You will be fine. Goodbye.
Though, if we're being fair, Leo did drag him to the hidden city against his will, so we can't blame him too much for that. Additionally, Hueso was willing to help once he realized how devastated Leo was at the loss of his brothers. From then on, his relationship with the turtles became slightly more friendly each time they helped him out. Though Hueso isn't exactly close with Leo or the rest of the turtles, and still gets easily annoyed by them, he considers them friends, or at the very least, good customers or acquaintances. Up next is the creepy and kooky Piebald. In her singular appearance, we learn that she was once Splinter's pet goldfish and the turtles' playmate. After being accidentally flushed and lost in the sewers for a year, she was willing to help Splinter teach the boys a lesson about lying upon finding her way home. But while we can't blame her for wanting to get back to her brothers, what puts her more in the gray area is how much of a thrill she seemed to get out of terrorizing them. Whether this was just a convincing act or she genuinely enjoyed scaring them, we're not really sure.
It's time for my flushing revenge!
Because she never appeared again, we don't know much about her as a person outside of her scaring routine. We still can't call her a villain though, so we feel that putting her in the gray is a reasonable compromise. When Sheldon was first created, he was meant to make the turtles' lives easier. He followed his programming to a T, completing chores, providing snacks and shell massages, and favoring his creator, Donnie.
Look, I won the game!
After the other turtles messed with his programming, Sheldon not only gained more free will, but also became more destructive and wanted to replace Donnie in the family. Thankfully, Rob was able to stop him from slicing up Donnie. From then on, Donnie and his drone had a better, though still sometimes unbalanced, relationship. In his new 2.0 body, Sheldon assisted around the lair and on missions. He could be brutally honest with Donnie when he needed it and help him out, but could also still be bratty whenever he and his creator clashed.
I roll. You did not just...
What puts him this high up, however, is when he sacrificed himself to protect Karai. Even though he was just following orders, he still made the choice to fight an impossible battle for the sake of his family, and we feel that counts for something. This is a strange pick, but we're putting Oroku Saki in the lower half of the gray tier. Some longtime TMNT fans may be confused, but in this incarnation, Saki and the Shredder are both the same character and separate characters. Let us explain. 500 years ago, the Foot was actually a peaceful clan, with its leader, Saki, being a noble and honorable man. However, when another clan attacked and the Foot found themselves on the losing side of a war, Saki was offered the dark armor by an Oni, which is heavily implied to be this universe's version of the Krang. Although he only took the armor because he was desperate, Saki was corrupted by it, his legacy being summed up as a madman desperate for power for generations. But while the dark armor is destructive and wants nothing more than to watch the world burn, Saki is a trapped soul that still cares about his daughter, Karai. Since he originally allowed the Shredder to exist, we can't put him in the good, even if it's obvious that this version of Saki and the Shredder are not one and the same. Up next is the Foot Recruit, aka Cassandra Jones. The Foot Recruit is one of 2 major villains in this series who were able to make a serious change, turning from antagonist to ally. When we first meet Recruit, we saw her eagerness and enthusiasm to please her senseis. She's overly aggressive in a way that not even the Foot Lieutenant and Foot Brute understand. And although she doesn't always understand them either and prefers to take action, Recruit is still desperate for approval and success.
Senseis, permission to vanquish his soul to the depths of oblivion!
She's hostile towards the turtles, but then again she's hostile towards everyone. Well, almost everyone. After feeling like the Foot didn't respect her, Recruit tried to make it on her own by training a troop of killer Girl Scouts and selling brownies in an attempt to take over the world. When it became obvious that this wouldn't work, Recruit had a breakdown Thankfully, Splinter comforted and encouraged her to put her passion and enthusiasm towards more good prospects instead of evil ones. While it took a while for these words to set in, Recruit did in fact take them to heart. In the series finale, when Splinter's Hamato essence was nearly taken by the Shredder, Cassandra finally took a stand and fought back, saving Splinter's life and officially allying herself with the Hamato clan. Although we didn't get to see her be a good guy for very long, we get the sense that her more villainous tendencies were more from being misguided and just trying to find her place in the world. The fact that she's also this universe's version of Casey Jones also makes us want to give her the benefit of the doubt and believe that she can, at the very least, become a crime-stopping vigilante, if not a full-fledged hero. Just barely making out of the bad tier is Baron Draxum. Draxum, alongside Big Mama and the Foot, was the big bad of Season 1. He mutated the turtles and wanted to use them to reclaim the surface for yokai kind.
Beautiful.
When it became clear that they weren't interested, Draxum turned his back on his creations and was willing to destroy them if it meant reaching his goals. His list of bad deeds include tossing Leo off a building, creating Uzquitos, and helping the Foot put together the dark armor. So what keeps him from being in the bad tier? Unlike the other villains who are only in it to gain power or destroy, Draxum is actually one of those the ends justify the means villains, due to believing that the prophecy talking about the Shredder was actually talking about humans. Since humans had already pushed yokai kind underground several centuries ago, Draxum vowed to take them out before they could do any more damage to his people.
Buffoons. If they will not stop the humans, I will do it myself.
Although this doesn't excuse his actions, you can understand where he was coming from. Then, in Season 2, after being defeated by the Turtles and betrayed by the Foot, Draxum was able to redeem himself through Mikey's guidance. He was willing to save a couple of humans from falling as a way of returning the favor, after Rolf and Mikey saved him from bounty hunters. He began warming up to humans slightly, even if he was still mostly a jerk. And we saw examples of him sacrificing his own safety to save his new family and even New York City. Now that's a change of heart. While it was great seeing Draxum grow and make a change for the better, he still has his flaws as well as a whole season's worth of evil deeds. We acknowledge that he's no longer a villain, and while we may put him just on the edge of the gray tier, we like to think that he has a chance of eventually making it into the good. Finally, we've come to the antagonist, the wicked and the villainous that we love to see get defeated. These are the bad to evil. First up, we have another unconventional pick, Jupiter Jim. Jupiter Jim, or Marcus Moncrief as he's also known, is the star of the Turtles' favorite sci-fi movie franchise. Although we hear plenty about the character throughout the first season, we don't get to meet the actor until a little later on. He seemed friendly at first, playing along with the Turtles and appreciating their enthusiasm.
Jupiter Jim fake blastered me!
But when Marcus invited the Turtles back to his apartment, things took a turn. Not only did he embrace the Jupiter Jim character, but he believed that he was the real Jupiter Jim. It was also revealed that he was kidnapping cosplayers that looked like the aliens he had fought in his movies, imprisoning them as trophies. And the Turtles, who Jim thought looked like the aliens of planet Reptilia, were next. Thankfully, Leo was able to use Jim's own delusions against him, but still, the whole situation was messed up.
Peace wins the day, but I'll be watching.
Jim can be arrogant, self-absorbed, and kind of a jerk. Though he may play an intergalactic hero, he's certainly fallen from grace. Next is New York's resident Repo Man, Repo Mantis. While Repo may look like a big, scary bug man, he's actually pretty chill when compared to the other villains who are constantly getting involved in schemes or causing havoc. Repo would rather just stick to a scrapyard and do his job, not at all bothered by his new form. As a Repo Man, Repo can come off as heartless, repossessing things like oxygen tanks and birthday cakes. He also went back on a deal with Donnie and Mike just so he can keep making money off the moon buggy that they wanted. And when they stood up to him, he threatened to break their legs.
Give me back my Dorkmobile!
This episode and his brief stint in the evil League of Mutants are the most hostile he gets, but in other episodes, he's a stern and grouchy businessman who just wants to work in a scrapyard and make money. He'll fight the Turtles when he needs to, but he won't go after them specifically. Plus, he adores his kitty, Mrs. Nubbins, and still tries to take care of her even after she turns into a terrifying Manti-Cat mutant. This hard-as-nails Repo Man has a soft side, making us feel like he's the least evil of the core villain cast. list. Up next are the Sando brothers, Ben and Carl. These two are a couple of muscle-bound knuckleheads, relying on their acrobatics and claw attacks to cause damage. Because they're more fighters than thinkers, most of their plans are simple and more dangerous than evil or malicious. Their first big plan was attacking a biosphere during a field trip, so they can have an audience for their acrobatics routine.
Come here, my little turtle. Let me pinch your cheeks.
Another time, they thought they could simply scare Roth into surrendering before trying to eat them. This plan was stupid, but Roth was already in a panic because he was lost. This plan was what accidentally triggered Raph's savage mode, which the Sandos immediately ran away from. These guys are more like clowns than actual threats, with their strength being the only thing that makes them even the least bit intimidating. They aren't schemers, they don't seem to have any real goals, and while they still can throw a serious punch, they aren't nearly as disruptive as some of the other villains that rank above them. They can be jerks, but are mostly just comic relief. Warren Stone likes to think that he's the Turtles' worst enemy. While we wouldn't go that far, he is villainous, despite his tiny and near-powerless exterior. His one and only goal is to destroy the Turtles and reclaim the fame he had as a newscaster. Most of the time, though, his threats are ignored, and Warren is often forgotten by the Turtles. In his debut episode, he actually ended up saving the Turtles' lives, if only so he could destroy them himself later. But to Warren's credit, he gets much more evil later on, like when he betrays the Turtles and April, selling them out to Gruesome, even after they agreed to help him save his roommate, Hypnopotamus. That's pretty cold. While he is more active than Repo or the Sandos and certainly tries harder when it comes to being a villain, he's too weak and has failed too many times for us to put him up any higher.
I will haunt your dream.
Right above his roommate and bestie, we have Hypnopotamus. A stage magician and hypnotist by trade, Hypno is one of the more powerful mutants. Though sometimes goofy, he can still be a serious threat. Between his razor-sharp rings and his hypnotizing powers, Hypno can be formidable and even a bit cunning. The first time he met the Turtles, he nearly decapitated them for just tricking him. Another time, he managed to trap the Turtles in an 80s fashion montage using a hypnotic song, allowing him to steal a magic book to make himself even more powerful. He's also prideful and was willing to make an entire school of innocent teenagers disappear just to prove that he was more talented than a rival magician. Though he may not look it, Hypno can be dark, but he does have a soft spot for his roomie, Warren, and was willing to work with the Turtles to save him from Gruesome.
I've got nothing up my sleeve.
Also, he's voiced by Rhys Darby of all people, so even if he doesn't always act like a nice guy, he certainly sounds nice. Hypno's done plenty to deserve his spot on this list, but there are still a few more villains who are a bit more evil than him, giving pro wrestlers everywhere a bad name. Next on the list is Ghost Bear. Even before he became an official villain, Ghost Bear was pretty bad. Though strong and skilled at wrestling, the key to his winning streak was his willingness to cheat, something that completely shocked his biggest fan, Raph. He enjoyed beating up and tormenting these turtle teens, both for the spectacle inside the ring and outside of it when he wanted to take revenge on them for ruining his wrestling career.
Not today, you don't do that for a spin!
Ghost Bear's mutation made him more dangerous and more brutal. If there's any good to him, it was that he worked with Raph during Battle Nexus New York to save both of their skins, though he did still ditch him in the end. Most of the time, Ghost Bear is somewhere between a bully and a beast. Petty, a cheater, and a jerk, he manages to make it all the way up to our top 5 baddies. Just outside of our top 3, we have the most recurring villain, Meat Sweats. Like Ghost Bear, celebrity chef Rupert Swaggart had an illustrious career before his mutation. A Gordon Ramsay-esque figure, he hosted the show Condescending Kitchen, where he yelled at chefs until they gave up their dreams. Yikes. After mutating into a giant pig man, Meat Sweats not only became a villain, but a cannibal. It's hard to get much more evil than that. You know, eye to eye with Hannibal Lecter. Throughout the series, Meat Sweats has tried to eat both Donnie and Splinter, attacked April and Sunita, tried to poison his competition with poisoned pizza puffs, and manipulated Mikey, his biggest fan, to get his hands on some mystic truffles.
The turtle is protected by a mystical were tree.
If we're looking at all the evil League of Mutant members, Meat Sweat certainly seems like the most heartless. With the most evil schemes under his belt and the most appearances out of all the minor villains, he ranks far above his former teammates. For third place, we've decided to give the Foot Lieutenant and Foot Brute the Bronze Medal of Evil. These guys are the current leaders of the Foot Clan. At first, they stick to stealing things like paper and breaking into malls and museums to steal certain artifacts.
I'm gonna grind your bones with my fist.
But as the series went on, we learned that their true goal was to resurrect their master, the Shredder. We're ranking these guys based more on their intentions than their evil deeds. In fact, when you watch them, you'd be forgiven for thinking that they're nice guys. Though they underestimate her, or are annoyed by her sometimes, both the Lieutenant and Brute are fairly respectable towards Foot Recruit. Outside of looking for the dark armor, they're often hanging out in the park, spending a Sunday at the Mystic Library, or running their shoe store. But while their evilness may not be as bold or constant, it's still important to remember their grand plan. These guys indoctrinate dozens of teens and young adults into their evil clan, all in the name of bringing the Shredder back to full power and unleashing his devastation onto the world, not caring what or who gets shredded during it. In this case at least, intentions and all the work that they put into reaching their goals do more to say about how evil these guys are more than anything else ever could. Arguably the breakout character from this incarnation of TMNT, Big Mama earns second place. Alright, where to start? To sum it up, Big Mama is a businesswoman. She enjoys making deals and outsmarting her opponents, manipulating any agreement she makes to go in her favor. Like when she agrees to help catch the Shredder, only to use him for herself. Big Mama is the owner of both the Grand Nexus Hotel and the Battle Nexus, a barbaric arena where fighters fight to the death. If it'll make for a good show, she'll throw anyone in there, including the turtles.
New York City will be my new Battle Nexus arena.
In fact, Big Mama is so focused on making a profit that she was willing to imprison her ex-boyfriend, Lou Jitsu, right after he proposed no less, and force him to fight. She works with known criminals like the Mud Dogs and making deals with Gruesome in order to gain even more power, with it being implied that she would kill them if they ever double-crossed her. What's the most evil thing she's done? How about capturing the entirety of New York and forcing the Turtles to fight for their lives in her special Battle Nexus New York before trying to destroy them with her so-called champion, Shadow Fiend, aka Shredder. With all this in mind, how is she not our number one baddie? Well, she has one moment of good. In the series finale, she helps the Turtles find Shredder. And keep in mind, this is only because she still had feelings for Splinter and wanted to help. It's not like these feelings ever stopped her from kidnapping and using him, so yeah.
How could anyone stay mad at those eyes?
Even with this one act of mercy, Big Mama is still the cruelest of the cruel, taking delight out of using others, always managing to put herself on top, and not caring how many others she has to step on in order to get there. She's really, really bad. But there's still one character who's worse. With all that in mind, we feel that the dark demon armor, known as the Shredder, deserves to be called the most evil. We don't get to see the true Shredder until the series finale, thanks to the failsafe that Karai put into place to prevent Shredder from reaching his true power. But even when he's not fully himself, he's nothing but destructive, seeing everything and everyone as an enemy that must be shredded.
And now your power will be mine.
When he's finally at full power, it's clear that this dark armored demon is pure evil. All he wants is to shred the world and to shred anyone that stands in his way, especially the remaining Hamato clan. This Shredder is so heartless that he will abandon his loyal lieutenant and Foot Brute, not caring about their injuries for a second. It should be noted that it was the destruction that the Shredder first brought about 500 years ago that caused humans to believe that yokai were demons as well and pushed them underground. Simply put, Shredder is a complete monster whose only goals are pain and destruction, and is our pick for the most evil character in Rise of the TMNT.
One of the coolest things about the most recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles iteration, Rise of the TMNT, was the incorporation of mystic weapons and powers. While the franchise briefly dabbled in mysticism during Season 5 of the 2003 version, Rise was the series that brought the concept to the forefront, with so many of our favorite characters and newest villains getting access to enchanted weapons and anime-esque power boosts. You have to wonder, who became the most powerful of this incarnation?
Hey there, I'm Kifinosi with Wicked Binge, and this is Rise of the TMNT characters, weak to powerful. As always, we're going to be starting with our weakest characters and working our way up to the powerful and nearly undefeatable. With this ranking, we're going to be taking into account their characters' weapons and abilities, their skills and intelligence, their resources, and their most impressive wins. Starting off this list, we felt that Warren Stone easily earned the title of weakest character. Yeah, apologies to Warren, but this was really no contest. Being the smallest and squishiest character in the show, Warren is out of his league when it comes to most fights. Even when Warren ends up getting a slight power boost, like the Mystic Gem in his first episode, or the Shredder Gauntlet later on in the first season, he really doesn't do much with these powers other than boast.
I love you too.
Now, to his credit, Warren is probably one of the most durable characters thanks to his regenerative abilities, but as useful as regrowing limbs is, it only gets you so far. For our silver medal of weakness, we have Baxter Stockboy. For those not in the know, this version of Baxter Stockman is a 10-year-old boy genius, and much like his adult counterparts, Stockboy doesn't really have much to fight back with. He does still have his robots, and they can provide a decent threat. His Stock and Shop robot kept Leo and Mikey on their toes, though it was easily defeated by April, and his Mousers were able to hack into the turtle tank and control it for most of an episode. But even with these instances, Stockboy still has 0 wins, and is, at the end of the day, still just a little kid. Getting the bronze medal of weakness is the evil puppet, Mrs. Cuddles. Though a bit unnerving and creepy, Mrs. Cuddles really can't hold a candle to most of the other villains in this series. She's able to scare others in a similar vein to other demonic toys like Chucky, and whenever people scream, it causes Cuddles to grow and become stronger. But even when huge, Cuddles is still just a plush puppet, so her ability to pack a punch is highly limited. Additionally, while screaming makes her grow, laughter can make her shrink back to normal size, making her very easy to defeat. Clumsy, yet still fairly strong. Next up is Bullhop. Though a reluctant mutant at first, Bullhop eventually managed to get used to his new form. However, that doesn't always stop him from tripping over himself. Still, as uncoordinated as Bullhop can be, he manages to be an excellent dancer when he focuses. We also can't ignore Bullhop's natural bull strength and size, nor can we ignore his bull horns. Honestly, we may be cutting Bullhop a bit of slack, but you can't deny that the dude has a ton of potential, and could probably be a legitimate threat if he ever decides to seriously train.
You got to go!
Next is the fake savior of the galaxy, Jupiter Jim, aka Marcus Moncrief. Once a famous sci-fi actor, Marcus believes himself to be the real Jupiter Jim. As such, he, somehow, has access to a variety of sci-fi weapons, gadgets, and armor. Marcus is able to perform the Jupiter Jim Nerve Pinch, a move that's able to paralyze enemies indefinitely. Though all these things make him a fairly decent opponent, it's Marcus's delusions and mental instability, as well as the fact that he isn't much of a fighter, plus his older age, that keep him from going any higher on the list. From a fake space hero to a robo-bear, we have Alberto next. So yeah, if you've played or seen Five Nights at Freddy's, you know how tough and intimidating animatronics can be. One of the earliest foes that the Turtles faced in the series, Alberto, was able to pack a real punch. Being made of metal, he's strong and incredibly durable. His inner wires also allow him to hack into other animatronics and turn them into allies for him to use. Despite his dopey appearance, Alberto is also pretty smart, given that he nearly took over an entire amusement park with only a bit of effort. Still, Alberto is far from undefeatable. While the Turtles may have struggled to physically fight him, April was able to bash his head in with a regular bat. Additionally, the Turtles are such terrible singers that their music was able to make him short-circuit. Not a traditional defeat, but a loss nonetheless for Alberto. Following him is the no-nonsense Bugman, Repo Mantis. It honestly isn't too surprising to see Repo so down low in comparison to the show's other recurring villains, as while he may look like a monstrous mantis, he's just a businessman at the end of the day. His sharp claws make for some pretty deadly weapons, to be fair, but Repo doesn't exactly have the strength to use them.
The purple one's funny.
He wasn't even strong enough to repossess an oxygen tank from an old lady, and later on in that same episode, Mikey had no problems defeating him with a ladder. His tow truck is just a regular truck, so no huge advantage there. His mantis cat, Mrs. Nubbins, doesn't really listen to him and is often trying to eat him, so she can't exactly be a resource nor ally to him either. Still, much like Bullhop, we're boosting Repo's ranking a bit simply due to his potential. Like we said, those claws of his are just things you don't want to mess with. Up next we have Senor Hueso. As the humble owner of the local yokai pizzeria, Hueso doesn't get too many moments to shine in terms of action scenes and often struggles when put up against opponents like the two mobs we saw in You Got Served or the Hidden City Police. Still, Hueso isn't a total pushover and has some skills that earn him a decent spot on our list. He's a competent sword fighter, and when fused with his brother, he can become Don Suave, a form that is able to charm anyone into surrendering. We only saw this form once, so we don't know if it has any limits, but it's still pretty powerful nonetheless. Ranking here is the friendliest face in the series, Todd. Although mostly a pacifist, Todd has shown several unconventional abilities that keep him from being considered as weak. For one, due to his superpower of friendliness, he's often able to get people to do what he wants, as seen with Mikey and Donnie when they tried to repo his trailer. His lemonade can also act as a sort of pacifying substance, which is good for distracting enemies. Secondly, Todd has shown small feats of strength, like when he carried the turtles to safety in Todd Scouts, or when he forged their new weapons in the Season 2 finale. Finally, we have to mention his Lemon Rush ability, where he calls upon the animals of the forest to fight for him. Yeah, it's pretty out there, but hey, it works. So while his pacifist nature keeps him from going any higher, it's safe to say that this capybara isn't one to underestimate. Reaching another villain, we're going to place Meat Sweats here. It's a bit frustrating to not see Meat Sweats any higher up, as this guy has one of the most OP abilities in the show, being able to absorb the abilities of other mutants.
I feel the rush of your delicious energy!
Though temporary, he's still able to use these stolen abilities to great effect. He also has shown his own natural strength, and a meat tenderizer he wields as a hammer, and is durable enough to survive getting hit by a train. But as powerful as Meat Sweats seems, the guy falls short due to him just not having traditional fighting skills. It's easy for the turtles to either outmatch him with their own skills and strategies, or simply use his stolen abilities against him. We also saw in Cloak and Swaggart that Meat Sweats wasn't even able to fight off a bunch of hungry humans when he became surrounded. Considering he's supposed to be one of the turtles' toughest enemies, that's kinda sad. We won't put him any lower down due to his previously mentioned abilities, which are again incredibly useful, but that's pretty much where his potential ends. Next up is the always ready to fight foot recruit, aka Cassandra Jones. For an ordinary human, Casey is probably right up there with Lu Jitsu in terms of impressive strength and fighting skills. She's able to go toe-to-toe with the turtles and always manages to put up a decent fight. We also see that she's apparently strong enough to bust through concrete without injuring herself. After feeling disillusioned with the Foot Clan, Casey ended up creating her own clan of sorts, turning a group of Girl Scouts into incredibly strong warriors. Her array of ninja weapons and skills with the makeshift hockey stick are also very impressive, and given that she was the one who saved Splinter in the Season 2 finale, we felt that Casey more than earned a decent spot, even if we still can't call her our most powerful human character. We've finally reached our first of the turtles, Donatello. Yeah, just like in our 2012 TMNT Weak to Powerful video, we had to rank Donnie as the weakest of the turtles. Part of this comes from his soft shell, which he has to protect with armor. Donnie can also sometimes be quick to panic, and like his 2012 counterpart, has been captured a couple of times. Considering all that, we still can't say that Donnie is useless in a fight though, far from it. Donnie's intellect as well as his mystic-seeking goggles do give him a bit of an advantage. We also can't forget his huge arsenal of gadgets and tech, including his rocket-launching bow staff, jetpack battle shell, and even a blaster or two. Probably his coolest win was in the first episode, where Donnie was the only one of his brothers to get a hit on Draxum. Skipping ahead to the Season 1 finale, while he did end up taking some damage, Donnie was still strong enough to hold off a powered-up Draxum long enough for his bros to launch their big attack. So yeah, even if he's technically the weakest of the turtles, this techie in purple still has a couple wins under his belt. Just slightly above him is Donnie's very own dorky pal for life, April O'Neil. Being an ordinary human teen this time around, you'd think that April would be much further down, but no, she manages to be pretty strong in her own right, despite getting captured 1 or 2 times. When it comes to weapons, April wields both a regular and an enchanted baseball bat throughout the series, and is able to do a ton of damage with both.
Don't make me use this.
Her fighting skills also extend to martial arts. Despite only getting a day's worth of training from Splinter in the episode Fists of Fury, she was still able to put up a fight against her much more experienced opponent. April's also incredibly clever, using her wits to defeat meat sweats in Cloak and Swaggart, and being able to get out of her bindings using only an almond in Always Be Brownies. Now that is impressive. Perhaps her greatest strength, however, is her refusal to give up, allowing her to win several fights that she would have otherwise lost. Ranking several spots above his roommate is the magical Hypnopotamus. We shouldn't have to tell you guys that hypnosis powers can be pretty dangerous, and Hypnopotamus is no exception. Using his mesmerizing call, he's able to hypnotize enemies, although the effectiveness of this ability varies. Sometimes Hypno's able to hypnotize all his opponents at the same time, and at other points he can only hypnotize one person at a time. It's also implied that he wouldn't be able to hypnotize a yokai like Draxum, given how easy it was for Draxum to capture him. On the plus side, Hypno's powers can be recorded and used to create hypnotizing cassette tapes that can trap its listeners in an outfit trying on montage. Not the worst threat, but a threat nonetheless. We also can't forget Hypno's other magic abilities, like his spells or his deadly razor rings that he once used to nearly cut off Mikey's head. Unfortunately, what keeps Hypno from going any higher is the fact that if his magic fails, which it usually does, he will usually not have the fighting skills to back himself up. He's more of a mystical fighter than a physical one, and thus will easily lose in that scenario. Jumping into the ring, we have Ghost Bear up next. Even before Ghost Bear's mutation, he was an insanely strong wrestler that was able to nearly defeat Raph and Leo in the ring. Granted, that was wrestling and not a full-on hand-to-hand fight, but it was still pretty impressive. Once he was mutated, Ghost Bear became even stronger as well as harder to defeat. Not only did he gain the strength, claws, and fangs of a polar bear, but he was also able to go intangible thanks to being part ghost, making it all the harder for opponents to hit him. This can, however, still be countered either by freezing him or by using mystic handcuffs. As such, his ghostly abilities aren't quite as impressive as they otherwise might have been. While Ghost Bear manages to be a threat in his own right, this only just barely gets him to the upper half of our list. Next are the leaders of the Foot Clan, the Foot Lieutenant, and Foot Brute. Being a sort of brains and bronze duo, Brute provides the muscle while Lieutenant provides the leadership, as well as the ability to create an origami army out of any kind of paper.
I'm gonna grind your bones with my fist.
Although individual origami ninjas can usually be destroyed with 1 or 2 hits, they can be decent threats when powered up. As for Brute, he injured Raph pretty badly in the episode Hot Soup the Game, and gave Donnie a pretty hard time in Operation Normal. What keeps these two from going any higher, however, is that they're occasionally pretty dopey and they have an occasional lack of care. Unlike someone such as Casey, who's full of passion and is always up for a fight, Lieutenant and Brute don't always share that focus, which can sometimes lead to their defeat. From Foot to Hamato, we have Karai next. Although we only get to have her around for a couple episodes, Karai certainly made an impression both in terms as a character and as a warrior. In her day, Karai had been the only one strong and skilled enough to defeat her father, Orokusaki, after he was possessed by the Shredder armor. Fast forward to the modern day, and while her time in the Twilight Zone had drained her, Karai was still able to briefly fight off the Shredder using the ability Hamato Ninpo. Even after her physical body was killed, Karai was able to transfer her spirit to April, giving the girl a bit of a boost and allowing her spirit to still fight alongside April. Because we spent so little time with her, it's a bit hard to know how she compares to someone like Splinter, but considering all she was able to do in the few episodes she was in, we still feel that Karai is one of the most powerful in the series. Following her is the first season's main antagonist, Baron Draxum. Draxum showed himself to be a threat right away. Using alchemy, he was able to summon powerful vines as both a defense and a weapon, and had the ability to create stone golems to fight for him. Draxum was also incredibly strong and skilled physically, as well as durable, given that he was able to survive being crushed by a huge pile of rocks, as well as his mystic energy getting absorbed by the Shredder armor. Speaking of which, while we can't count the Shredder armor in this ranking, as that power boost was both temporary and unstable, Draxum still put up an impressive fight in the Season 1 finale against Splinter. Ultimately though, he wasn't able to defeat Splinter on his own, and had to resort to threats in order to get Splints to do what he wanted. After losing the Shredder armor, Draxum became incredibly weak, but was still able to slowly regain his strength over time, being able to save a pair of humans from a Ferris wheel, as well as being able to beat a powered-up Sloppy Joseph. Though his inability to defeat Splinter or the Shredder keep him from the top, this warring warrior scientist is still pretty powerful, all things considered. said to be one of the greatest fighters of all time, it's no surprise to see Splinter this high up. Between his training from his grandfather and his fights in the Battle Nexus as Lujitsu, Splinter probably has the most combat experience in the show. With all of his strength and skill, Splinter was able to fight off opponents that were several times his size, and even those with mystic abilities. And this was all as a human. Splinter is not only a martial arts master, but is able to use an array of weapons, both conventional and certainly unconventional. Like, if you can defeat an enemy using a ladder or a fish, you're probably pretty powerful. His mutation into a rat also granted him a tail that he could use as a whip-like weapon. And we certainly can't forget Splinter's impressive stealth and ninjutsu skills.
Ninja invisibility.
As we said before, if not for Draxum threatening to torture his sons, Splinter would have won their fight. Later on in that same episode, Splinter was able to fight off the entire Foot Clan, again, despite a bad back injury. Although his age and lack of mystic weaponry stop him from being ranked higher than the rest of his sons, Splinter certainly lives up to the title of Battle Nexus Champion. Finally reaching another turtle, we have Leonardo. Compared to the rest of his brothers, Leo struggled the most with mastering his mystic weapon. Once he got in some practice though, he was absolutely amazing with it. I mean, have you seen his fight in Many Unhappy Returns? Now that's the power of portals! Later on, when he's given his teleporting katanas, Leo becomes even trickier to hit, getting a huge speed boost, being the only one not to be slowed down by the Shredder's spikes. Occasionally, due to him being a red-eared slider, he can be a bit clumsy, though it's never too much of a hindrance. But perhaps even more impressive than Leo's portals and his swordsmanship are Leo's strategies and ability to see all the angles in a situation. Again, we have to mention his great plans in Many Unhappy Returns. You could also look at episodes like Jupiter Jim Ahoy, Air Turtle, and Layer Games to see examples of Leo being able to use a situation to his advantage, or being able to think several steps ahead. At the time of writing this, the Rise of the TMNT movie has yet to be released, but considering the previously mentioned examples, we feel that he'll have no problems tackling his new role as team leader. Just above him is the youngest turtle, Michelangelo. It's like Raph says, nobody flips like Mikey. Taking a page from his 2012 counterpart, Mikey is incredibly agile and acrobatic, as seen in the fights during Evil League of Mutants and You Got Served. Much like his father, Mikey's also able to use his surroundings and unconventional weapons to his advantage, which is how he was able to defeat Casey in Hot Soup the Game.
How much they want for this?
But of course, what really earns Mikey this spot just outside of the strength podium is his Kusari Fundo. This weapon it's just insane. It's able to create huge fire tornadoes, allows him to lasso and toss around enemies, and it even allows him to be strong enough to throw an entire cargo boat. Just wow. However, because this crazy strength comes from his mystic weapon and not from himself, it sadly wasn't enough to get him into the top 3. For the Bronze Medal of Strength, we had to give it to Big Mama. Big Mama is essentially to this version of the TMNT what Kingpin is to Spider-Man. She has the entirety of the Hidden City in her pocket, having enough wealth and enough people working for her to do pretty much whatever she wants. In her spider form, Big Mama can use her webbing to capture others, allowing her to potentially win fights without needing to throw a single punch. We also can't overlook Big Mama's intelligence and cleverness, as we see throughout the series how she's able to play others in order to get exactly what she wants. Basically, if you try to make a deal with her, chances are it won't end well. However, there are a couple of things that keep her from being in the absolute top. Despite her size and strength in her spider form, Big Mama isn't much of a fighter. There's a reason why she has to hire people to fight for her. It's still possible for her to be both overpowered and outsmarted, and her tendency to be charmed, as seen with people like Bullhop or Don Suave, is also a pretty notable weakness. While her influence, resources, and intelligence still make her a force to be reckoned with, Big Mama still just can't quite compare to the strength of our top 2 characters. Earning our Silver Medal of Strength and the title of Strongest Turtle, we have Raphael. Makes sense, given that he's the one who's always ready for a fight. Being a snapping turtle, Raph is the strongest without a mystic weapon, having both the muscle and the size to fight off multiple opponents with ease. He's even strong enough to throw and carry his brothers without breaking a sweat. Then of course, there are his mystic powers. His aura form that grants him a strength and size boost, and his aura claws that pretty much give him his own mini army. So yeah, Raph's got a lot going for him, though he still isn't quite unbeatable. As said previously, Foot Brute was able to beat him once. Raph's tendency to run into fights without a plan can also sometimes be a detriment. And while he isn't dumb, Raph isn't always the best strategist either. Though his natural strength is just as impressive as his mystic abilities, there is still one character who beats Raph, and the rest of the cast, hands down. Finally, our gold medal of strength goes to none other than the Shredder armor. Yeah, I mean, this really shouldn't be a surprise. Forged by a Krang, the Shredder armor is a powerful piece of dark magic. Though it can warp or destroy the minds of those who wear it, the boost in power that it grants almost makes that a moot point. Although it previously had one small weak point, this weak point was quickly fixed, making the armor pretty much indestructible. It can heal itself, and it can break through anything from Raph's aura form to Donnie's tech to even a giant cargo boat. Things only get worse for its opponents once its mind is restored and is able to fight with actual skill instead of just fighting like a feral animal.
No one betrays Shredder.
Though it can be temporarily stopped or controlled using mystic items such as Karai's sword or Big Mama's collar, it ultimately took the combined ninpo strength of the entire Hamato clan for it to be finally defeated for good. And even then, it was a pretty close call. It's hard to say whether the upcoming movie's antagonist will be stronger, but for right now, we can safely say that the Shredder armor is the most powerful being in Rise of the TMNT.
After a 2-year wait, the Rise of the TMNT movie is finally here. In this latest installment, the Ninja Turtles are faced with their greatest challenge yet, an alien species known only as the Krang.
If this isn't the poster shot, someone's getting fired.
With the new Casey Jones by their side, Leo and the gang are going to do all that they can to save the world. With old and new characters alike showing up in this movie, which ones have grown to the new heroic heights, and which ones are the most evil characters we've seen yet? I'm Kifinosi with Wicked Binge, and this is Rise of the TMNT, the movie, Good to Evil. As always, we'll be starting with our most noble and honorable characters. These characters are the good. Getting our gold medal of good is the Rise team's original leader and the oldest brother, Raphael. Prior to the movie premiering, we were told that Leo would be the leader, meaning that there would most likely be some friction between him and Raph. Thankfully, instead of being jealous of Leo or bitter at losing his rank, Raph's anger primarily came from a place of care and concern. Though he was maybe a bit harsh about it, all Raph wanted was for Leo to take things seriously and stop taking so many careless risks.
What's it gonna take for you to be serious, Leo?
As always, Raph cares about his family the most, even if he sometimes hides it under anger and frustration. What truly earns Raph his top spot, however, is the big sacrifice he makes. When it's time to retreat, Raph not only blocks a would-be fatal blow, but also gives Leo his escape pod, giving himself up to the Krang. Even under threat, Raph refuses to give up any information. Unfortunately, Raph spends most of the second act under Krang's control, and thus ends up fighting his family and assisting the Krang, but we aren't going to hold that against him. For our silver medal of good, we're giving it to the mystical Michelangelo. While being the youngest turtle of the team, Mikey's also the most hopeful and optimistic of the team, always trying to keep in good spirits without being oblivious, and without having Leo's cockiness nor arrogance. He loves his brothers with his whole heart, doing things like cheering Leo on when he tries to break Donatello's pizza stacking record, and getting Donnie to cover after Donnie loses his battle shell. We also learned that Mikey ends up being the most powerful mystic warrior in the world, and honestly, it's about time Mikey fans gotta win. Using his mystic abilities, Mikey allows Casey Jones to go back in time to save the world. However, doing this forces him to make the ultimate sacrifice. But not only does Mikey give his own life for the cause, he also does it with a smile. Later on, towards the very end of the film, Mikey nearly does this again when he tries to use his mystic abilities to save Leo from the prison dimension. You could argue that this second would-be sacrifice was even more noble and honorable, given that this was a young Mikey with his whole life still ahead of him, instead of an older Mikey who would have had to continue fighting Krang if he hadn't given his life to create the time portal. Between this and Mikey's ever-present role as the heart of the team, we felt that he truly deserved to be very near the top. Sticking with the Turtles, we're going to give our bronze medal of good to Leonardo, the new leader of the team. Now, there are two sides to Leo in this film. Let's go ahead and get negatives out of the way first. Simply put, after defeating the Shredder and not having any major threats left to face, as far as he knows, Leo becomes very cocky and careless. He sees Raph's frustration and insistence that he grow up as Raph just being bossy, and in some instances, Leo very much acts like a jerk. He also struggles quite a bit when Raph sacrifices himself to the Krang. Ironically, he ends up adapting to a personality similar to how Raph is traditionally portrayed, that being hot-headed, overly emotional, and wanting to go in head first instead of planning ahead like Leo typically would. But again, much like Raph, Leo's mistakes come from the same place as his strengths, his love for his family. The moment Raph's life is in danger, all Leo wants is to save his big brother. Even after he realizes what he was doing wrong and changes his strategy, actually being willing to listen to his team and acknowledging that he doesn't have all the answers, Leo never gives up on Raph and is eventually able to bring Raph back by humbling himself.
Come back! Your family needs you!
We also have to hand it to Leo in that once he's called out, he does indeed step up and tries to correct himself for the sake of the people he loves. This fantastic character arc culminates in Leo sacrificing himself. Hey, are you guys seeing a theme here? Anyway, even if it means being trapped in a prison dimension and likely dying at the hands of Krang, Leo doesn't even hesitate, finally understanding what it means to be a leader and a hero. This version may have more flaws than other Leos, but at his core, he's still got a good heart behind all the ego and Ben Schwartz-esque snark. Next up, we have the teen from the future, Casey Jones. Though technically the second Casey Jones in this universe, named after his mother Cassandra Jones. Though not as crazy as the traditional Casey Jones, this Casey still wants to be a hero and fight for the greater good. This includes doing what he can to help out his sensei, Leonardo. Whether it's saving older Leo's life after he's struck with a fatal blow, or calling the present Leo out for not listening to his team.
How could it go so wrong? Because you weren't listening to your team!
This also includes following Leo's lead, even when it breaks his heart. Like when he removes the Krang's portal key under Leo's order, trapping Leo and the Krang commander in the prison dimension. All in all, this Casey's not really much of a punk nor vigilante and is instead just a good kid. But that shouldn't be too surprising given that he's voiced by Haley Joel Osment, aka Sora from Kingdom Hearts. Following him is the future reporter in training, April O'Neil. Even before the Krang are released, we see April being active and taking her journalism major incredibly seriously. Once she hears that her university is possibly involved in some sort of conspiracy, she takes it upon herself to investigate and gather evidence. Furthermore, April uses this evidence, vials of illegal herbicide, as a weapon against the Krang, saving both Mikey and Donnie from being crushed inside the turtle tank. April gets another awesome hero moment when she uses a crane to trap the Krang's sister, protecting Casey and Splinter. In other words, April's just as awesome in the movie as she is in the main series. Her only real negative moment is when she takes her frustrations out on Splinter when they're unable to destroy the Krang key. But given how tense that whole situation was, we can kind of understand. Nearing the end of this tier is the last of our turtles, Donatello. Yes, like with our first list, Donnie is still the least moral turtle, though we aren't saying that he's villainous or anything like that. In fact, Donnie makes a pretty big personal sacrifice. Despite his sensory issues and being very obviously grossed out by the Krang's tech, Donnie still gives himself to it so that he can control the Krang's ship. This ultimately doesn't amount to much since the Krang commander quickly realizes what's going on, but hey, it's a thought that counts. We also see Donnie trying to protect Mikey, even without his battle armor. Nonetheless, Donnie still sometimes struggles to show emotion, resulting in him coming off as a bit insensitive at times. This isn't necessarily a knock against his morality, but it's still worth a mention. Finishing up the good, we have the skilled sensei and rat dad, Splinter. Yeah, well, we may love Splinter and his absolutely amazing character arc in the main series. He unfortunately doesn't get too much time to shine during the movie. For the most part, he's the same rat dad he always was, albeit a bit more active and trying to step in more often. He does get angry about the turtles being loud and interrupting his TV shows, which shows that he's still a bit of a couch potato, but when his boys are fighting or when Leo is making mistakes as he's dealing with emotional turmoil, Splinter at least tries to give them some guidance.
Listen to your team. This is not about you.
We also have to point out how, even after getting hurt and knocked out briefly, Splinter doesn't just stay behind and wait at home. He's always doing something, whether it's trying to destroy the Krang key with April or helping April and Casey with their fights. He doesn't get any big moments of sacrifice like we see in the show, but at the very least we can say that he'll stay by his family's side as he does whatever he can to help save the day. Moving on, we've now come to the characters who aren't quite good nor evil. Welcome to the gray area. We actually only have two characters in this tier, and given how close they are, we're gonna pair them together. Taking the sole spot in this tier are two of the fan favorite baddies from the series, Warren Stone and Hypnopotamus. Only getting a brief cameo in the first act of the movie, Warren and Hypno are technically the ones who kick things off, being the ones to steal the Krang key from the museum. Now, you might think this would be enough to put this duo in the bad tier, however, it's pretty obvious that these guys didn't realize the full implications of what they were stealing. Warren even says that he and Hypno are only interested in robbing banks with the foot, not really having a desire to take over the world nor destroy everyone. Unlike the Foot Lieutenant and Foot Brute, Warren and Hypno didn't truly have any villainous motivations outside of your typical Saturday morning cartoon villain motives. That being said, they ultimately decide to dip once they see the danger they've caused, disappearing from the movie entirely. On one hand, you could call this cowardly since they didn't even try to help with the fight against the Krang. On the other hand, given that the Krang can take away mystic powers, it's hard to say whether or not Hypno and Warren helping would have actually made a difference, or if it would have just gotten them killed. So while we certainly wouldn't call them good guys, we're gonna cut this pair of roommates some slack. Finally, we've arrived to the most wicked characters of them all. These characters are the bad to evil. Getting the Bronze Medal of Evil are the heads of the Foot Clan, the Foot Lieutenant and Foot Brute. Unlike Hypno and Warren, who were naive and never wanted to cause any real widespread damage, the Foot Lieutenant and Foot Brute aren't nearly as innocent. You would think that these guys would have learned after being abandoned by the Shredder that trying to summon some ultimate power is probably not the best kind of plan.
We shall free them to lay waste to this world.
Unfortunately, these two only care about bringing doom to the world and gaining power over others. Not only are they fairly evil, but they're also pretty foolish. But while they may be the main catalyst of the Krang's return, knowing exactly what they were doing even if they weren't necessarily expecting the Krang to betray them, their lack of screen time in the film stops them from falling any further. For our Silver Medal of Evil, we're giving it to the Krang Commander's brother and sister. Every good villain needs their henchmen, and it's a bit ironic that the guy trying to tear our favorite family of turtles apart has family himself. While they may not be the ones leading the way, the Krang Commander's siblings still do plenty of evil all on their own. The Krang's sister seems especially cruel and bloodthirsty in that the first thing she does when she gets out of the prison dimension is ask if she can kill something.
I haven't killed anything in ages.
We also see her laughing at April and Splinter's heartbreak after Leo sacrifices himself. The Krang brother, meanwhile, is silent but deadly, ultimately being the one to trigger the mass mutation of the Foot Clan and at least several dozen New York citizens. He's also the one who controls the Krang's portals and defends the ship's controls, playing his part in the evil trio well. But while these two siblings aren't necessarily stuck in their commander's shadow, there's no denying that there's still one character more evil than them. Finally, and unsurprisingly, the Gold Medal of Evil is going to the Krang Commander. The Commander is the literal brains behind the entire invasion, wanting his ultimate revenge against humanity after being trapped in the prison dimension for 1,000 years. Along with being just as cruel as his sister, the Commander is also someone who considers strength to be the most important thing of all. In turn, anyone or anything he sees as weak is someone he sees as worthy of only death and destruction. Throughout the film, he's constantly taunting the turtles and enjoys sicking wrath on his own family, almost seeing it as entertainment. Even when the Commander is finally defeated, he has no qualms with taking his anger out on Leo, nearly beating the poor kid to a pulp.
Wipe that grin off your face!
In terms of good qualities, you could argue that there are hints at him having a soft side for his siblings, not dismissing his sister even after she loses an eye. Still, given how little he mourns the rest of his species, considering them weak for not being strong enough to survive the prison dimension, we have a feeling that any sort of softness is minor and ultimately not worth much. If this movie is truly this incarnation's last hurrah, then it's safe to say that the Krang Commander is Rise of the TMNT's, as a whole, most evil character.